So if you need to if you need to turn off the microphone, you need to hold the button down. Members of the public are encouraged to participate by offering comments on each item on the agenda with a time limit of 2 minutes per speaker. Additionally, we will have 2 open forum sessions tonight, one at the beginning and another at the end of the meeting, where you may speak for 2 minutes on topics not covered in the agenda. For those participants that wish to speak, please speak clearly and audibly so that our microphones capture your remarks, ensuring the commissioners and remote audience can hear you. The Code of Conduct establishes the rules of decorum to be observed by both commissioners and members of the public when addressing policy matters during meetings. Its purpose is to foster open and constructive discussions on public policy matters, promoting an environment of fairness, politeness, and respect for different perspectives. When participating in the meeting, please adhere to the following. Focus your comments solely on the item under discussion. Direct your remarks to the entire assembly. Please refrain from attempting to engage individual commissioners or staff members and direct conversations, as they will not be honored. Refrain from using abusive language, which is inappropriate. Failure to comply with this code of conduct will disturb, disrupt, or impede the orderly conduct of the meeting, may result in removal from the meeting. Thank you for attending this evening, and we are excited to hear from you in a few minutes. Before we get started, let's introduce our commissioners and city staff. Mindy, can I please have a roll call?
Yes. Okay. Commissioner Finn,
Present.
Chair Jasinski is not here today. Commissioner Dawson,
Here.
Commissioner Mawad,
Present.
Commissioner Khan, she's not here today. Commissioner Navarro, also not here. Commissioner Beeler, also not here. Vice Chair Partita,
Here.
Commissioner Tran,
Here.
Commissioner Moore,
Present.
Commissioner Saperman,
Here.
Commissioner Salazar is not here, but Commissioner Gabriel,
Present.
thank you, and we have quorum.
Thank you. Let's turn our attention to the consent calendar. We do have 2 items. The minutes from March 13th and April 10th. Does anybody from the public wish to speak on the consent calendar items? Any commissioners? Okay. Roll call. Oh, can I get a motion to,
I will make a motion to approve both of these that we have,
Second.
March and April.
Go ahead. Take it.
okay,
Second.
so first from Commissioner Finn and second Commissioner Dawson.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the consent calendar, which is the minutes of the March meeting and the minutes of the April meeting.
Yes.
Commissioner Finn,
Excuse me, could you repeat?
the motion is to approve the consent calendar made by Commissioner Finn with a second by Commissioner Dawson, and the consent calendar includes the minutes for March and April.
Yes.
Commissioner Dawson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Partita,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Mawad,
Yes.
Commissioner Tran,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Saperman,
Yes.
and Commissioner Gabriel.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, we will move on to reports and information. I have no report other to let you know that Ryan will not be attending tonight. Eric?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I think today we'll go through later on our considerations regarding the Measure E spending plan. And we have notated already in the notes the commission's prior recommendation from last week on this issue. So we'll just kind of rehash and then we'll restate that prior recommendation from the prior committee meeting.
Thank you. And the council liaison?
I have no report other than Councilmember Dwan will not be here, so I'm here to assist and facilitate as I can be helpful.
Okay. And does anybody have any questions for the director or the council liaison? Okay. So we'll move on to the first open forum of the night. Members of the public will be granted 2 minutes to speak. You may speak only on items that are not on tonight's agenda and are within the subject matter of the jurisdiction of the commission. Direct your remarks to the entire commission. Please refrain from attempting to directly engage individual commissioners or staff members as they will not be honored. Does anybody have any public comment? Any commissioners? Okay. So we will move on to old business, but since we don't have any, we'll move on to new.
Excuse me,
Yes, yes.
can I ask a question about some old business?
Yes.
I just wanted to direct this to housing and I wanted to see if we could get an update on what was happening with the two Harmony properties. The one that the RVs were having their rent basically doubled. And the other one where there was a couple of other issues going on. I'm just wondering where that stands now.
Okay, so Eric Sullivan, Director of Housing. So a new compliance order has been reissued and we're reinitiating the process due to some administrative questions that were raised during the prior compliance order process. So that was issued to the operator of the site earlier this week, I believe. And so the 10-day clock is now running. And they have filed for the appeal and we're going through the process now.
Thank you.
Any other questions under old business? Okay.
I don't know if this is old business or not. Sorry to interrupt, Chair. My Chair, but I know a lot of us commissioners tend to ask for follow-up items and usually you or someone would say, we'll follow up and send that to you. And sometimes that never happens. Do you guys have a standard kind of an SLA of when to deliver those items that we request? Do you guys have that in place? Do you guys plan on having one? And is there, who's the person that's following up on the request that we made that you have agreed to send over that doesn't get sent to us?
Yes, so Mindy tracks the following of items and as items come together for follow, we then distribute them. There's no standard timeline for this. The last 2-3 weeks have been budget very much focused. So if any outstanding items that there are, Mindy will provide a follow-up prior to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. So that's a standard SLA the following before.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then I think we need to recognize him into the record as joining the meeting.
Yes,
Yeah.
Commissioner Navarro is here.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move on to new business. The first item, draft 2025-2030 consolidated plan, draft fiscal year 2025-2026, annual action plan and draft amendments to citizen participation plan. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Cupid Alexander, Deputy Director of the Housing Department focused on homelessness, data, and grants management. Tonight, I'll be presenting the city's proposed amendment to our Citizen Participation Plan, also known as the CPP. Next slide, please. So the CPP is a requirement from HUD to ensure residents, especially those who are low income or underrepresented, have a voice in shaping how we use federal housing and development funds. It governs how we engage the public on the consolidated plan, annual action plan, CAPER, and any substantial amendment. Next slide, please. So we're amending the CPP for several reasons. First, the Federal CARES Act waivers for public participation expired in May 2025. We must now return to standard HUD procedures. Second, we're streamlining the plan to reduce administrative burden and clarify public hearing requirements. Third, we aim to broaden engagement and make it easier for all voices to be heard. And finally, this update prepares us for the next 5-year consolidated plan cycle and improves how we gather and incorporate community input. Next slide, please. So some key changes include clearer timelines. If you can see on the left to the right, those the current CPP and then the proposed changes. So key changes include clear timelines for public comment, additional outreach methods, and flexibility to use digital tools for engagement, ensuring accessibility for more residents. It strengthens our accountability and transparency throughout the planning process. Next slide, please. So tonight, we're asking the commission to conduct a public hearing and provide your input on the draft amendment. We'll incorporate public feedback and return to City Council with your recommendation to formally adopt the amended CPP. And that is that part of the presentation.
I'm going to open up the second one.
Thank you. So we will start with public comment.
We're together, so he's going to, yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. We broke it up so you knew there were two different items, but they're consolidated together. And then Eric, if you have any insights, go ahead and add them after I'm, okay, thank you. Good evening, it's me again, Cupid Alexander, Deputy Director of the Housing Department, focused on homelessness and data and grants management. So tonight I'll also be walking you through the draft 2025-2030 consolidated plan and fiscal year 2025-2026 annual action plan. These documents guide how we invest federal funds into housing services and community development in the city of San Jose. Next slide, please. So just quickly, what is the consolidated plan? This is our 5-year roadmap for affordable housing and neighborhood investment. It tells us how to allocate 4 federal funding streams: CDBG, home, ESG, and HOPWA, housing opportunities for people with AIDS. Next slide. So the consolidated plan, it's not just a technical plan, it's built around what our community told us they need. It reflects local priorities and helps us to act on equity and opportunity. Next slide. So the process. We followed HUD's required process, including data analysis, needs assessment, and public engagement. But we made sure it wasn't just compliance, it's meaningful, it's community-driven, and it requires a lot of input. Next slide, please. So some of the key features is that we held 2 citywide meetings, one online, one in person. We also led 46 focus groups with nonprofits, developers, and advocacy organizations. Next slide. We launched an online community survey and got 405 responses. Across all efforts, 817 people engaged with us, making this one of our most inclusive planning cycles. Next slide. Responders were around 51% renters, 49% homeowners, 74% identified as female. We also had strong age and neighborhood representation. So 4 top needs rose to the surface from the top community identified needs. More affordable housing for renters, more services for unhoused residents, seniors, and people with disabilities, more education for tenants and landlords, and improvements to neighborhoods and access to opportunity. So you'll see we translated those needs into 3 big goals. Number 1, reduce unsheltered homelessness through housing and supports. Number 2, increase housing affordability through development and preservation. And 3, strengthen communities by improving livability and safety. So this year we have over 25 million in total HUD resources. That includes new allocations and unspent funds from prior years across all 4 HUD programs. Next slide. These funds support food access, street outreach, and homelessness prevention. We prioritize programs that serve low-income and high-need populations. Next slide. Supports also housing rehab, code enforcement, and program delivery. Helps preserve housing and strengthen neighborhood infrastructure. Next.
Skip that one.
And also invests in ADA improvements, sidewalk repairs, and lighting, especially in underserved neighborhoods. These are infrastructure projects that make neighborhoods safer and more accessible. So these additional construction projects support public facilities and meet federal accessibility standards. It's about building environments that are functional and dignified. And as you recognize, some of these projects we've already talked about. You had questions about, just reminding you the purpose of some of these CDBG, CDI, and construction funds. Continue, please. They also help small businesses with technical assistance and microloans, targets underserved entrepreneurs, and builds local economic strength. Next slide. It also covers some of our administrative costs, like compliance and oversight, ensures federal dollars are used transparently and effectively. Next, please. So with the home activities, home funds affordable housing development and down payment assistance, also supports partnership with community housing development organizations. You might have heard Eric talk about these, that's CHODOs. But home is one of the financial resources that help community housing development organizations. Next slide. So for housing opportunity with people with AIDS, serves residents living with HIV and AIDS, includes tenant-based rental assistance, short-term housing, and case management. Next slide. Also supports permanent supportive housing for people living with HIV and AIDS, and combines stable housing with long-term services and care coordination. So think about those wraparound services. Next slide. ESG is emergency solutions grants focused on emergency responses like emergency shelter support, rapid rehousing, outreach to people living unsheltered, and those are our core tools for addressing homelessness in real time as we expedite our responses at a street level. Next slide, please. So a few next steps. Final public hearing and council vote on June 3rd. Submit the plan to HUD by August 6th. Begin implementation thereafter and report back on outcomes in fall 2026 via the CAPER. Final slide. That is it. So we'll include all public comments in our final plan submission to HUD, and we value and respond to community input. It strengthens our plan and ensures our accountability. And with that, that is the presentation.
Thank you. So we'll start with public comment. Is there any public comment? Okay, thank you. Okay, but if you do, you could just come up to the mic. Okay, so we'll start over here with Commissioner Moat.
Yep, thank you. So thank you, by the way, for sending these in advance because it was a lot of stuff. So it was good to read it up in advance and get my questions prepared. 2 questions. First is on community engagement. City of over 1 million people, we only had 405 respondents. I know that's been a challenge getting people to vote and other things, but any insights into why the engagement was that low? And then the second
Yeah.
question, oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No. Ask your second question. Yeah.
Yeah, the second question is, there were funds left over from last year that rolled over to this year. What would cause that to occur? Is it just projects that weren't completed or, yeah, so.
Yeah, and I'll give a response and then I'll ask Eric to chime in if I miss anything. So one of the first things that we did is look at ways that we can expand citizen participation. I think you've seen a challenge not only with voting, but just in general engagement, that fatigue. So we expanded ways and we changed some of the partners that we engage with to see if we can get a broader outreach. So that is what our plan is going and moving forward. But we definitely noticed that we did have a robust response, but you're absolutely correct. In a city of about 1 million people, we would want a greater response. We're really going to focus on broadening our partnerships. So the ways that the housing department had done it before and the partners that they had, we've expanded that circle to make sure that we're hitting key demographics across the city. To the other one, Eric, I'm going to ask you to chime in on that. I believe we had some rollover for projects that either didn't get their capital stack funding or weren't able to get it out the ground. But Eric, if you have any insights.
Yes, so for the outstanding prior year fund balances, particularly for CDBG and home dollars under the home program are difficult compliance. So those who receive that funding would have to be familiar with the complexities of the compliance report on an annual basis. So that fund balance is big because a lot of the other recipients in either housing development projects or housing services projects were unwilling to take on the compliance issues. We have now figured out a way to spend down that balance through our partnership with the county. So that fund balance will drop dramatically rolling into the following fiscal year. With CDBG funds, there are outstanding city executed projects through our partner departments in Public Works, PRNS, as well as Department of Transportation. And those projects just haven't yet gotten to the top of the execution list. But based on our communications with my colleagues, those projects will be done in the next fiscal, given the risk to clawbacks and all existing federal funds on this list based on the most recent proposed federal budget.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gabriel?
Just a general comment or question, whichever way you want to take it. Basically similar to the previous one. I attended one of these in-person meetings once in February, and I think I was one of 4. The only reason I was aware of it is because of being engaged with what's going on. I wonder if there's a way to engage the general community population in inviting them to be part of what's going on in their city by maybe appearing as approachable as we really are, but they don't know.
Absolutely. I'll take that as a comment, but I will definitely receive that. One of the ways is that we're thinking of non-traditional inclusion efforts. So not making it just a stuffy meeting, but trying to engage them. We thought about like the lived experience advisory board and really getting that word of mouth out. So absolutely receive that, and you will see changes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Finn?
Yeah, just a couple of things, but they're all pretty much the same. On your first presentation, at the very beginning, the recommendation, it talks about conduct a public hearing on draft amendment for the city citizen participation plan and take public comment as required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Can you explain to me exactly what is take public comment as required? What comments are required by the U.S. Department of Housing? Because we don't seem to be getting a lot of comment. So.
Yeah, so under the requirements on Title 24, the federal code, comments that are received from the public that are germane and substantive to the subject matter being presented, which is just the legal way of citing Title 906, means that at a lot of historical public meetings, the topics and comments were not at all part of the plan, the future planning, the projects, what's proposed. There were complaints about homelessness and housing, general city issues, taxes, like a whole bunch of items that are not necessarily germane or substantive to the plan that we're bringing forward. And so what that specificity meant and what the comment in the program means is there's probably a whole lot of other comments about other things going on in the city, frustrations, complaints within the city that are not necessarily a part of the plan and specific to the plan and the items in the plan. And that's what that references to.
Okay, so it also says under the other plan that you reached out in an e-blast to 3,604 recipients who were different types: affordable housing, anti-displacement, fair housing, general interest, market rate. And do you know how many people responded from that e-blast?
No, we do not know how many respondents. We know how many opened it, because we can track opening of the email, and the percentage of those who are opened is usually low, less than 30%. Most of these types of emails, like most sort of city email blasts and newsletters, end up in junk mail accounts. But we add to the list our total distribution now for, as an example, the housing department newsletter is above 20,000, less than 3% open it actually. It's very low, and that's why we've expanded social media presence. We now have a LinkedIn page. We now have it's the latest version, Blue Sky like account, like all these new social media things I'm not at all familiar with, but we've expanded more of those accounts because that gets more interactions than sort of email blasts.
And have you had more interactions through those?
There is interactions in terms of likes and views,
Okay.
whatever that means, but yes.
Also, and I heard you, Mr. Alexander, say this number, 817 residents responded to the citywide survey. And then there's a list, attachment A, of community outreach and survey results. And it seems a vast majority of this was done in 2022.
Yeah, there are some done in 2022 and some done in 2024 over the course of the consolidated plan timelines. So yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, towards the end of the last half of 2024, I see some meetings picked up, and then very few here in 2025.
Yes.
I heard you also mention a little while ago that you're trying to find ways to try to get more participation.
Absolutely.
And we would really like more participation here as well on our commission meetings. And the way that I see to do that is to allow public comment over Zoom again. This is a horse I will continue to beat, and I'm beating it yet again. We need to do something to get more participation from the public, but yet we're tying our hands when it comes to allowing people to phone in and call in with their comments. There are a lot of people who are disabled, who have other transportation issues and can't actually physically get down here. And now the only thing they can do is watch what happens here with no public comment. And I know it's out of your hands. This is a council thing. But again, I would like if you guys could express to council that this would be a valuable tool to use to reach out to the rest of the public that you're not reaching at this point in time.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. That's all I have at this moment.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt. Commissioner Finn, next time you speak, can you speak closer to the mic? People in the audience are just having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
You bring it closer, yeah. Thank
Commissioner Saperman.
Thank you. Very curious, kind of the level of engagement that was done with the unhoused community and if that was primarily done through the community partners that are listed.
Yeah, let me, I have some staff online, so I'm going to ask them that question. I don't have that level of detail right now. I don't want to say I'm going to follow up. I'm going to try and get this information right now. So give me 1 second. I will try and get this information so we're not saying, oh, I'm going to follow up with another email to you. But I do not know that right now.
Okay.
Commissioner Dawson.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'll start with citizen engagement since I guess we're doing this all at once, right? It looks like we're eliminating one HCDC hearing. So that's going to chop 30 days off your timeline. And I'm not happy about it, but I can live with that. I guess what I need to understand is we saw something prior to the actual written con plan. We had, I believe, one public hearing, didn't we? And then now I want to know if that one public hearing, if I'm going to see a final con plan document to review at the public hearing for HCDC. Are we going to see like this? Are we going to see something less than? So the public hearing is going to be on the final con plan document. I want to ensure that that's correct before I say, okay, let's drop the other hearing. Okay.
Yes, I understand. Okay.
Okay. And then, you know, I was trying to remember how many of these things I've read over the years, and I would say 40% is supposed to be an incredible open rate. I know precious little about social media, but I'm told if you hit 40%, that's amazing. So I guess maybe that's our goal. But what worries me just a little bit, I think you might have actually done better this year than historically. If
Yes.
you had the past reports, we would be saying, great job, rather than saying, why aren't we reaching more people? And when you think about a city of 1 million people, it has always disturbed me that there's just no participation. I think the difference now is we used to say, okay, we tried, let's moving right along. We did the best we could. Now the expectation level is so high. And what bothers me when I looked at the list, and, you know, you talked to Spur, I think Spur had an office, the Spur Board of Directors. So, you know, not high on my priority. I love Spur, by the way, but not high on my priority list. But what I don't see is what I would call regular engagement in the neighborhoods. Like, why aren't we going to council offices? And I know some of them did put it in their outreach because I saw it. So kudos to some of them that did it. But why aren't we going to the, somebody help me, what's it called now? Each district has a leadership team and there's an umbrella team.
The district leadership team.
Yeah, just the district's leadership team. I say we go to those folks and say, tag, you're it. It's your job to reach out into your neighborhoods. And I looked up my zip code 95111 because I'm right next to a huge concentration of rent controlled apartments. Right next to single family. And, you know, I just wonder, Commissioner Zimmerman asked about outreach to homeless. I wonder how many of those folks in those rent controlled apartments where I know there's overcrowding, I know they're rent burdened, you know, they're difficult to reach. You can't go door to door. That is not practical, but I like the idea that you said you're going to be creative because I don't plan on, I probably won't be here in 5 years, but what I'm saying is, if I'm still able to, I'm going to tweak that doc up and see how you're doing on outreach. And it's just got to be a lot better and more creative. So appreciate the comments on that. But my question is this, if I live in District 7, I speak only Vietnamese, and I want to view the con plan, do I have to drive all the way to City Hall to see it, or is it accessible in a nearby community center? Hopefully libraries, because we're making them sort of hubs now.
Yeah.
And where did the con plan live? Were there multiple copies, and how did that go?
Yeah, so you're talking about language accessibility. We do provide language accessibility upon request. We do have a strong relationship with the library. There are safe harbor languages that we would readily have available. So the request just has to come in. We can get that information over to someone. That's usually not the impediment. And to your other comment, in these HUD processes, and I know Eric and I have both done them for cities and housing authorities, where you have to go through something extensive, 5-year planning process for a 1-year implementation of 5 years. It's hard to get that community input unless you give them context. So you have to tell them, here's what this is and here's what this means to you. Because if we're saying, hey, we have this consolidated plan, it's a 5-year planning document with an implementation plan of 1 year. They're like, well, what mean for what the president was saying? And so I think we're trying to be cognizant, and Eric and I have very brutal conversations together about the practicality of how to present this information at a level and an understanding depth that people can feel value from it. So definitely we'll take those comments from you and figure out a path forward, because in all honesty, when we're going out, and I've stood before communities here and other spaces, take some time to kind of explain out to them, here's what it is and here's what this means to you. They're like, oh, I don't want to go to another meeting, because they have that meeting fatigue. So I really, especially when you're reaching out to lower income communities and those who are going to be centered in some of the low to moderate income areas that are pressed for investment that we are identifying, the challenge is always going to be, here's another meeting. What does this mean for me? Are you all the housing authority? Are you the county? Are you city? What is the city's value to having this conversation? And how do we create some sort of context there? But we're up for that challenge to try and figure out new and creative ways to get in people
Well,
information.
thank you for that. And I will tell you, when neighborhoods do show up back in what we call the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative, and you say, hey, you got $1.5 million to spend, and we're going to do a dot exercise to set priorities, they show up. So I think it is very difficult, just like you said. So I don't know if you can make it more real in
Oh.
terms of money. And I think, are you timed? I'm being timed. Aren't we allocated? Can I ask a
Not for this item.
Yeah.
I do have some responses for you from staff. So
Oh.
we have the con plan online in Vietnamese, in Chinese, and in Spanish. All were translated. And then Commissioner, to your prior question, we went to the LEAB twice. We went to one time to an executive committee and one time to their full board. So we have tried to engage with the Lived Experience Advisory Board. Apologies for interrupting.
No, that's wonderful. But I think I find librarians are looking for stuff to do. And if they know that you're going to drive traffic to them, and I think the way you're collaborating interdepartmentally, the semi-annual homeless report, that was a joy to see everybody sitting up there together. It was really rewarding for me personally. So I hope you can drive more traffic. I've got a bunch of small questions, but there's one thing that's just kind of driving me crazy. And and I wrote it down, city does not have a working definition of homelessness. That's a quote from the document. It's in the con plan somewhere.
City doesn't have a working definition
It
of.
says the city does not have a working definition of homelessness. I apologize, I didn't write the page down.
Okay, yeah.
Could you get back to me on that? and I'll try to
Absolutely.
Find it.
Absolutely, because we do have working definitions of homelessness. Otherwise, how will we measure our success? If you can point out the page, I will follow up with you.
I
Commissioner.
can
Yeah.
dig it out in
Yeah,
here because
please do.
because it was kind of strange. And one thing I've always wanted to understand more, and I'm not going to expect this question tonight. Where is it? Page 25. My seatmate here is quicker than I am. And he knows how to use computers. So at any rate, I've always wanted to understand this continuum of care board and how the city interacts with the county, because that's kind of a focal point right now. And frankly, I've never understood it. And the county did different outreach. I'm on their email list, and they did a different outreach thing than you did. And couldn't we sync? So anyway, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so the COC falls under a different section of Title 24. They're subject to different requirements than the city's obligations for the administration of the comp plan and the programs underneath the comp plan. Because the continuum of care has its own separate line of funding, its own and then within the continuum of care, there's also the community plan to end homelessness. That's separate and apart for our work around the comp plan and the programs we administer under the comp plan. So there are two different lanes of federal funding. So what the COC board represents is representatives from all the municipalities within the county,
Yeah.
including the city, to then fund objectives in line with the continuum of care, homelessness response, rental assistance. There's a plethora of different programs that fall underneath of that, but they're separate and apart from the work that we do at the city. There's the comp plan and the programs we administer here.
And if I wanted to go observe one of their board meetings, is that a public meeting?
Yeah, the meetings are public. So right now, I represent the city on the COC Executive Planning Committee. I will be sure to share the information that's publicly available and when the public meetings are going to happen, both with Mindy, so this HCDC team can know when what's going on.
I appreciate it. If I spend another 20 years, maybe I'll figure all this out. Oh, gosh. Okay, I'm just going to ask one more question for your forbearance, but I'm wondering what, and actually, thank you, because questions were already asked about the huge rollover down at the end there. That bothered me. The 4 million that's not tagged, I think it's about a little bit over that's not tagged. That bothered me just because it's undefined. So I'll just note that for the record. But I'm trying to figure out, the Home First has its own outreach team. I think they get about 418,000. So that's not our outreach team that you supervise. What do they do differently and how do we coordinate and how does Home First train their people? How do we
Yeah.
know their?
Yes. So let me take a moment to break this down. Commissioner, I called you council member, Commissioner. So we do, we do have contracted partners who do this work with us. We have built a larger team recently. Before, the city was a pass-through funder for contracted partners who contract with different Bay Area cities, sometimes counties, to do outreach work. They're very well trained. So they're understanding housing first models, trauma-informed care. They understand how to negotiate and navigate some of these spaces. They have great relationships with some of those who have lived experience. So part of what the city of San Jose has done is with someone like Home First, we'll put out an RFP, say, are there individuals who are entities that are wanting to engage in homelessness work? But what you've also seen is a shift for us starting to build our internal capacity. So we have our targeted outreach and engagement program. We have contracted partners who do that work for us, but you're starting to see a shift where we're going to bring more of that internally.
And they have a unified supervisor, so there's consistency.
They have a unified supervisor. Eric and I go over their budget alignment. They're not too happy with us sometimes right now because we're asking the harder questions, pushing towards outcomes that get people inside, but in a very trauma-informed way. So you know how to approach and build relationships with those who are unhoused.
Well, thank you. And you're making me feel better, but I'm going to share a frustration I have is that we look at things like the con plan where we make decisions about homelessness, but we don't get the full context of presentations that are frequently made to city council. And you're getting better about telling us about those meetings, but I do think and would ask that housing department always notify HCD when I realize the timing is hard to get everything done. So it's going to come to us, then go to CED, then go to, that's hard stuff. But if you could let us know with an email that something is happening, because I find the presentations that are being made to council now, partly because we have a lot of frustrated council members, they are so data rich and so informative. I just wish all my colleagues would know about them. And, you know, we did have a discussion about having a separate homelessness commission, because I feel like they get left aside. And I remember the days when we had different commissions doing different things, including mobile home. And I feel guilty about how we're neglecting. Sometimes I feel like we neglect. People get neglected now because nobody likes long meetings. So I'm just sharing a comment with you. And thank you for the document. I know it's crazy good, but some of the data at the very beginning comes from the survey. Then there's data towards the end that's point in time. So, okay, yeah, I think I
Yeah.
kind of figured it out.
Yeah, and take some time to look at it. I mean, even we see this every day and it takes us a minute to kind of absorb it all, but definitely receive your comments.
Well, I hope that, I will say over time, this is one of the most ignored documents in the city I've found. And it's ridiculous because it's a great document. I thank you. I thank staff for all the work. Thank you.
Commissioner Trent?
Yes, thank you. For the $4 million rollover, you mentioned earlier that you have a game plan with the county for how to spend down those plans. Actually love to learn more about that. I don't think I got too much information about that idea or the proposals consideration in the documentation. And this is, I'm assuming, in reference to the annual action plan for FY 25-26.
Okay, and this is for the spend down, the carryover balances you're referring to. So within the two programs, so CDBG and Home, specifically first to the Home program. The Home program has what is known as a very difficult compliance program attached to it for all of its funds and expenditures. And so that money has been sitting there accumulating for years. What we have done now is, in concurrence with the county, we're moving a bucket of those funds out to support our work around tenant-based rental assistance, because that becomes eligible activities, as well as some other home repair program work that we're going to be administering, because we know the county can take on and manage the compliance requirements of it, which lessens the burden on Cupid's team and the grant compliance division. For CDBG dollars, the primary projects that have not been executed are with the Department of Public Works, PRNS, and the Department of Transportation. Those are all related to community facility improvements, such as pools, lighting, infrastructure, kind of basic community investments. So we're going to be prioritizing those projects to ensure that those CDBG funds get spent down and not continue to carry over. Some of them are now entering into their fourth and final year for execution and administration. And then technically under the regulations, we would lose the funding. So that's where those buckets of funding that keeps carrying over balances is now going to get spent and made the investments.
Well, I mean, it's good we're finding uses for that. I'm assuming then the correlation is to the $4.4 million referenced on page 25, reserved for public infrastructure or rehabilitation.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And then for the con plan itself, I'm actually wondering, I know that the continuum of care was referenced as one of the plans that were taken into account when the con plan was drafted. How is it incorporated? I mean, is it just we're looking at the con plan and then seeing how it plays against the draft, or is it part of the conversations that you represent?
It is absolutely part of the conversations. The community plan to end homelessness is the intersection of all the deliverables that the city and the county has towards ending unsheltered homelessness. That is an intersectional conversation, but basically what it's talking about is resources to push towards outcomes. And so when we have these conversations, part of it is one of the things Eric mentioned, unspent fund balances. And if the partners can't get those dollars out the door, that's a hard conversation, because then you start having a conversation about, do we contract out differently? Who is a partner that can get there? What are some of the impediments for the projects? Did they run out of other federal money? Did they run out of city money? So part of the community plan to end homelessness is how we're going to implement all of our funding streams to make sure that we have, you usually have to have some sort of checks and balances on sources and uses, and they can't be compatible. So you can't use through federal funds. The way that you have these conversations and in those meetings.
And is that same approach taken for discussions around the continuum of care?
Absolutely. So the continuum of care is the process that we go through. So the continuum of care is all the deliverables that we have. Yeah.
Okay. Because then I saw it as referenced as a plan that was factored into the creation of this draft. But I think there's also an entity as the regional continuum of care.
Yeah, so you're talking about the COC, so that's the regional entity, but the community plan to end homelessness is the actions and activities that that regional entity goes through in order to implement the actions that we take. So one is the group, the other is the plan that the group comes up with. We integrate where it's allowed and aligned with what the city would like to do and the HCDC, and we make sure that the sources and uses and clarity around the funds is there. So basically, if I was to simplify this, we go through plans, we make sure partners can do what can be done. We talk about outcomes, and then we double check to see if they're spending the funds, if they can even do what we're asking them to do. Those are very uncomfortable conversations sometimes, but necessary.
So these conversations then are done in the context of assessing current grantees and how they're performing their obligations.
Yeah, some of that. And then also in alignment with what the region would like to see, but they do not control these particular funds. We try to see if we can capital stack and leverage towards greater outcomes. So one of the ways that Eric has done that is, as you saw unspent funds, he found an opportunity to leverage the infrastructure of the county, but it's going to be specific to the city of San Jose's deliverables. So you don't have millions of dollars sitting over there because some partner they were over capacity and couldn't spend the dollars down.
Yeah, okay. Actually, because also, I guess I'm kind of curious too, to see how we can learn more about how the feedback from the Regional Continuum of Care Council played into the decision in policymaking that we do locally. Do you have an answer? Like, is there a way for us to kind of see a little bit more about, learn about that?
Well, I think attending some of the meetings would be the first way, but we're currently kind of getting into the plan for the COC's 26 to 30 5-year plan. So they have their consolidated plan. We're running off of the previous 5-year plan. So right now would be the best time. We're just starting these conversations. So they also have to go through public hearings, and that would be the best time. Their public hearings are going to be in the fall. The last time they did public hearings was about 5 years ago. So they had 5 years ago because they had to do something similar with their own 5-year plan for the community plan to end homelessness.
Okay, appreciate that. And then lastly, actually, this data was for me very fascinating. This is the first I've heard of CHAZ, I guess as a data source. And I'm wondering too, because all of these tables were presented as part of the report with specific numbers referencing like a number of households, size, income levels. Is this data specific to Santa Clara County or just San Jose?
It's San Jose specific data.
Okay. So, I mean, because based on this data, I mean, I think I saw here, we have like Pacific Islander families who deal with a lot of housing issues who definitely fall into, very low AMI. I mean, just the information itself, and it really illuminates who is dealing with these issues, which is of course very broad based, but I think it also counters maybe some of the misconceptions about who suffers more or greater, right? Not that it should be a competition in a way, but at least we're going to have a much better idea of who has to deal with these issues. So with that actual bit of information, Chaz, this is the first time I've seen this data presented to us like this, at least that I can recall. Very, very, very good draft here, because we get to see a lot more of the populations we're trying to serve. Also too, and then just on the community participation plan. I mean, I was actually joking with Commissioner Dawson about who was going to be the first to talk about zooming in. But just to summarize the proposed changes here, it's basically to comply with COVID rules expiring. The threshold for when community engagement rules have to be implemented is raised, but the timeline for that has also been extended. Is that right? Just generally speaking?
Can you rephrase that?
Sure. Like the expiration of the COVID-19 regulations around community engagement. I'm reading the report, and my understanding of it is generally the threshold, the dollar threshold that has to be met for these community engagement requirements to be triggered has gone up. On the other side of it, though, the timeline in which the community engagement has to occur has been extended.
Yeah, that's my understanding also. If I'm hearing you correctly, the threshold and timelines, yes.
Got it. Okay. And then is there any consideration about how Zoom or virtual participation plays into this game plan?
So the community plan development does not prohibit the utilization of Zoom. And there's a page in this document that shows all the meetings that were heard. A lot of them were had through Zoom in order to receive feedback. That is a separate question and practice from the work of the commission and how we engage in receiving community feedback.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate that.
And Commissioner, just really quickly, I want to mention, we were talking about CHAZ. CHAZ stands for Comprehensive Housing Affordability Strategy. So anyone listening, if they're like, what are you talking about? It's Comprehensive Housing Affordability Strategy. Staff just updated me, so.
Yeah, thank you for that. Actually, that's very helpful as well. And then lastly, just want to comment on the engagement piece. I know in the city of 400 participants doesn't seem like a big number, but having been on the commission since 2017, that actually represents an increase for what we've seen in the past. So I will take it as a positive sign. There's always room for growth, but that's definitely looking better than before. And just to be clear, though, I mean, there was, I guess, 400 official responses, but based on the presentation and what I read in here, what that represented, though, was 800 participants, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we did notice, and we mentioned that it was an increase from previous years, but that number is still something that we're aiming to exceed.
Of course. Thank you.
Commissioner Peeler?
Okay, real quick, because I'm sorry I'm late, guys. I don't get out of work till 5:30 now, so I'm like always gonna be late. Are we also talking about this too? or not?
yeah, the-
This is also included. Okay. I just want to let you guys know on page 10 of 20, it says that HCDC meetings are held on the third Thursday, but it's the second. So that's the second paragraph on that page.
Page 10.
Yeah, on page
Thank you.
10. Yeah. And then in relation to the participants, I couldn't help but notice a majority of them. Oh, and by the way, that was the community participation plan.
Yeah, CPP.
Okay, yeah,
yes.
okay. I couldn't help but notice how most of our participants are 45 years age and older. And I was like, man, and so just while I was thinking about that, I thought, I wondered if you guys did any colleges. I did see in 2022, there was like something, it said school connection, and I don't know what that meant. But we do have a university in our city.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever hang out at San Jose State or attempt to engage the students or?
You know, the level of coolness that we have.
Just thinking they probably walk by and be like, why are you bugging me in that suit?
Yeah, no,
you know.
we're definitely trying to have inroads over there. So that is something that we did notice.
Maybe some political party, groups inside there that might actually be interested in community engagement, but I hear you like.
Absolutely. No, I think you're noticing what we notice is when we see these generational gaps in the areas of respondents versus the areas of need.
Yeah.
We want to be sure that we're addressing that. So that's definitely on our list.
Yeah.
Open to any ideas also.
Oh, yeah, cool. Well, and the other thing I thought is, you were talking about social media. City of San Jose's got like, little less than 17,000 followers. But maybe, maybe doing questions on stories where they can put like one word answers or things like that, like multiple choice where they can just push a button. Ways that people can make quick observations without spending a lot of time, because like you said, they are tired of interacting with everybody. The world is kind of, it's a little intense outside right now. So I think that some people are kind of glazing over, but maybe if there was a fun way to do it, just as an idea, I just find that sometimes when I'm on social media, I will hit a poll and hit B, or whatever. And normally I'm not writing anybody anything, but I will hit a love button and I will hit, an option. So
Yeah. And that's one of the things we're looking at, likes and things like that, but we're also looking at podcasts,
Yeah.
short form ways of getting information out. Eric kind of mentioned that before. So he's been working with whatever time he has. I'll see how he does it, but working with our social media and with our communication staff. So definitely.
yeah, I mean, that might be cool to do like a segment where you're just going around asking people at cause San Jose has great events, and you could be interviewing people off the street. And they won't even know they're participating, but we're recording their information. So, and then, yeah, I mean, I think that's really it. I mean, this was very comprehensive. But I will say this, it was great because I read this last year and I understood it better this year. So maybe next year I'll understand it completely, but I did not get this packet until 1:30 yesterday. So I really did not give it a go. And I know it's nobody's fault. I saw the post date. It's just like, I have the worst postman. So just saying.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moore?
Thank you. Can you pull up my presentation? I just have to give one caveat when I do it. So 2 meetings ago, when I saw that we were allocating 700,000 to legal support for fair housing issues, it was a red flag for me. And so I asked for the data, as you probably remember. And you have the presentation. So I spent about 6 hours reviewing the data I got. It was the first 3 quarters. If you go to the next slide. What you'll see on the right, well, let's go through the left. There's about 38,000 ARO units. There were 63 claims, 6 were single family housing. I did 3 passes of this. The first pass, I'll show you the results. It was what were the claims made. The second pass, and individually, the second pass was what were the outcomes. And then the third pass was which of those claims were actual fair housing violations. So there were 9. And then 20 were negotiated agreements. The caveat I have to mention is that the budget allocation is changing. In this document, it's down to 500,000. If you look at page 12 and 17. So if you look at the box on the right, if you use the 700,000, which is what I had until this morning, the number of, so what I did is I extended it. If it's 63 claims in 3/4, then that's 3/4 of the time. So what would it be in a year? It'd be 84 claims. And if it was 20 negotiated agreements, what would it be in a year? It was 27. So if you look at the budget allocated based on the 700, those organizations are getting over 8,000 per claim. And they're getting 25, almost 26,000 per claim resolved. So next slide. This is the slide where I looked through and just said, what were the claims? And then, so you can see there were no violations. So on the left side, before you get to the 11 possible violation, this is what, there were no violations, there were unlawful detainers, there was non-payment of rent, there was a discrimination claims against neighbors, there were 6 of those, there were 4 lease violations, 4 translations requested, 3 unable to pay rent. And then on that input, there were 11 possible violations by housing providers and 8 discrimination claims. So go to the next slide, because it might be confusing based on how I did it. The next one was the outcomes, what those organizations reported. The first one was 21 had no legal remedy. There was no fair housing violation. 18 of them had no resolution. There was no evidence provided. And then if you look at the next 3 bars, 9 were resolved without court, 7 were prevented loss of housing, and 4 were negotiated soft landings and move out. That's 20. And then 3 were counsel and advise. So 1 entry had no information. So this is all based on 62 because the 1 entry had no information. Next slide. So the key point here is they resolved 32% of the violations. Most of them were not fair housing violations, but they're doing about 1 out of 3 they're resolving. Next slide. Oh, no, wait, go back a slide. They were getting about 8,000 per claim and 25,000 per resolution. I had a problem where I went to my law firm. They resolved it for less than $1,000, and this is a for-profit law firm, so I wanted you to have that too. Next slide. Because I've been involved since the beginning, I had some data. So there were actually 9. So my third pass was looking at what the claimant said and then how the organizations responded and which one of those were actually fair housing violations. And I found 9. And if you extend that for a year, that would be an estimate of 12. And then I don't have any data for the years before that, but I do have data for 2010 through 2015 from the housing department, and there were about 22 hearings required per year. So it's hearings required means there's a dispute and it needs to be mediated and resolved. And so if you kind of compare this with the 20 that they resolved, we're about the same. There's not this huge increase, even though Project Sentinel's going to the libraries and community events and telling renters how to claim discrimination and what rights they have and how to deal with things. And so if you kind of go back and you look at it, a lot of them are claiming discrimination, but it doesn't really exist. It's because they're being evicted for non-payment of rent. So that's where I did the third pass. So if you go to the next slide, the claims made that were really fair housing claims were 14% of the claimants. 86% were not for fair housing issues. And what I want you to know is I really care about people being housed, and I care about people being able to afford to live here. And so I want to see us shift our thinking about this because you can spend all this money on legal, but they're getting like 26,000, or even if you have it, they're getting 12,000 per case that they resolve. And that doesn't keep people housed. That just helps them advise people as they're being evicted. And so I'd really like to see, so 86% of the claims were not fair housing issues. They were about paying rent. They were about problems with neighbors. They were about translation being needed. One of the problems with neighbors was a woman was actually, it was really sad. And I almost put up the quote of what was in there. She was really being abused, but they didn't report it to any agency. They just left it unresolved. So all of those, like about a third, aren't resolved at all. And, you know, that something needs to be done differently there. So solutions I think are needed are more rental assistance, because that 500,000 right now could go a long way to keep people from unlawful detainers and from homelessness. And then the other thing I really want to talk about is, since I got involved in 2015, the city's been so focused on the rights of tenants that they're creating bad tenants. They're telling them, they're giving them the keywords to use, like discrimination, so they don't have to be responsible for not paying rent. One of the three organizations negotiated someone not having to pay $15,000 in rent or for repairs. And the housing provider agreed to it because they just wanted them out. But that's not really creating more housing for people. So what I'd really like to see happen is that the city starts teaching people about responsibilities being a renter. So that's credit score, paying rent on time, following the lease. Those are really important. And not teaching them to not be responsible and not helping them not be responsible. Otherwise, so I just had a vacancy. I had 422 inquiries. I set up over 90 tours, and I saw their credit scores and their income. And I can't tell you how many people had 300 to 500 credit score and 150,000 a year in income. It was so sad because they don't know how to manage. They haven't been taught that. Maybe they haven't been taught it when they were younger. And there were good people who crossed my path, but because of how expensive it is to file an unlawful detainer, I can't give people breaks, even though I know they'd be a great renter. I just can't. And so by focusing on renter rights, the result is fewer and fewer people who qualify for the available units. So I don't know, does this all make sense? I think you're creating bad rent. I think the city in the past was creating really bad renters. And anyway, enough of that. So I want to make one other comment. I attended Project Sentinel's education program, and it was really about the renters' rights, nothing about the responsibilities. And it was not balanced at all. I don't know if you need a different organization or if what they really need is credit score, paying their rent on time and following the lease. Because as you can see, out of 39,000 units, there were 9 fair housing violations in a year. In 3 quarters. So that's nothing. And that's with people Project Sentinel trying to get business, right? So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Navarro.
I know I don't want to beat a dead horse, but in regards to outreach again, just the number of people that were surveyed, and I do community relations and outreach for local government as well. You guys consider this a success? Enough where you get a good representation of the community?
We received the feedback that we received. There was aggressive outreach, and so determinations of success are highly subjective. So based on the lengthy and multi-year progress to make community engagements. What we received is what we received. Whether it's successful or not is entirely a subjective term, and we're not rated on that.
Now, three groups stood out to me a lot. And focus group, African American ancestry, 3 people. Indigenous peoples, 1 person. And these are groups that, what would I say, have historically had underinvestments. So was there any priority to reach out and make sure?
Absolutely.
Did you want to go back and follow up to get more people to participate? Was that done, or is this something you guys are looking to do?
Yeah, no, it's something that's currently done. You know, the city of San Jose has our social and racial equity office. We look at ways that we can engage, but I think the deeper question here is that a lot of these communities feel skeptical in engaging with any department. So what we've shown is that we're going to continue engaging with them deeply, because if you look at the history of just how engagement happens, a lot of individuals, especially the responses that we get, they're like, yeah, no, or like I mentioned before, they don't understand what this is because it's very, very complicated. So we're rethinking how we're going to roll out this to the youth, to marginalized communities, language accessibility, making sure that the language is it's written in a grade level, because everyone responds a little bit differently. I guess it just depends how deep and honest you want to be in regards to that, because I agree with what the Director Sullivan said. Well, we receive what we receive, but if you ask the team what efforts are there, I mean, half of them are from these communities. They put in the effort.
So I'll make one recommendation now. June 15th is coming up. Housing Department has had a booth, at least the last 2 that I've been at. I would love you guys advertise this and have some information and ask the community. And if you get volunteers, it'd be a great way to connect with a bunch of other organizations to see if any of their staff or they have community. Just because these are, I mean, with Indigenous people and African ancestry, I mean, they represent communities that have been heavily underinvested. I definitely want to see more of that. I understand we're all busy, but I would definitely love that to be a focus and add some urgency to that. The third group was formerly homeless. Second Street Studios. I'm probably the only person out there in the world that has spent 6+ hours in that building, just not involved, not part of a nonprofit. It was part of my job, but I really wanted to make that. So I weaseled my way into that apartment complex and got to speak to a lot of people. And I know there's a nonprofit, I don't know, what is it, Agave, whatever it was, that manages it in the daytime, and they have meetings. But 4 is a very, very low number for an entire complex full of formerly homeless people. And again, that's, reduce unsheltered homelessness is one of the goals. Again, I would like to see more effort in that to get the people that are going through the process and see if we can get their opinions. But yeah, I didn't want to kind of put my own perspective on this outcome, because I mean, I've done it before. If you get low response, it is what it is. But it's kind of like, is that enough, or to do a little bit more?
Yeah, I think we are moving intentionally. So we take the feedback, we see the gaps, we redirect some of our activities, and you'll see us engage deeper to get more representative and broader outcome. So Eric and I don't dodge anything. It's very well received. and you will see some intentionality increase in regards to where we're going to be responding.
Okay, wonderful. And then the one thing that did stick out in regards to, I guess, the 3 plan goals, when you talk about reduce unsheltered homelessness, increase housing affordability, strengthen communities. I understand expand housing access, right? We all want more affordable and more increase in the inventory. But when you say self-sufficiency resources for individuals and families experiencing or at risk of homelessness, that to me does not mean a strong anti-displacement strategy. It means, unless that's what you meant, because if so, we would like to see what those metrics are going to be, and
Sure.
what equity.
Yeah.
But when I see self-sufficiency resources, it could be something like, hey, I'm having problems, like what Commissioner Moore was referencing, into a group that helps, deal with issues in regards to evictions, and that's a resource. But
Yeah.
I could you maybe tell me what
Sure.
benchmarks
Yeah,
those
so
are?
some of the things, so Eric mentioned something that is actually a self-sufficiency program. If you look at the tenant-based rental assistance program, if you connect that in a voucher program with like the housing authority, or even with our support, that self-sufficiency is built in through the requirements of the program. There's also a federal program called Family Self-Sufficiency that allows you to not only work through a tenant-based program, but to build equity by having, I forgot what it's called, but it moves you towards getting home ownership ready, getting rental ready. And then even when I was talking to the Commissioner Moore, I was talking about what's called Rent Ready. It's a program where individuals are taught how to become rent ready for their next step, because a lot of the individuals who are unhoused, they might have had challenges in their past that won't let them get to that next step unless they get exploited. Those are forms of self-sufficiency. If we're talking about how you overlap that with anti-displacement, it's like, well, anti-displacement is anything from staying in your neighborhood to living in a neighborhood you want to be in. These programs that allow that flexibility is where a lot of these families find, yes, I'm able to stay in the city of San Jose with its limited supply by becoming that ideal renter. But when you go into those communities, they're very challenged because of the history. So they're like, is someone going to help me get this eviction off my record? Is someone going to help me get my credit up? Is someone going to help me with my down payment assistance? So those are ways that we're thinking about how you increase self-sufficiency. And those are some of the programs. Tenant-based rental assistance is one of the strongest ones, in ways that people can get assistance to become self-sufficient.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't think, and that's great, by the way, thank you. But our community doesn't know that. Right. I mean, you can barely get anyone to respond back to the survey. But, people are becoming homeless, people are living in the cars. I mean, I've had that experience myself. But it's not, unless, and I apologize for my ignorance, unless this is on the city's website, in all these programs you just mentioned in order, and who to call and how to proactively remind people on all your social media platforms. It almost seems like it almost makes it difficult to identify an equitable benchmark success.
Commissioner, I'll share a quote my mom shared with me. Sometimes in order to change the narrative, you have to change the narrators. So we're coming in with new ideas, but I think I mentioned this before, having been entrenched in these communities on behalf of the city of San Jose and in other communities too, understanding all of these moving parts is difficult, even for us. So if you can imagine someone who's under immense amounts of stress and you're saying, hey, I want you to come to this meeting to talk about something. They're like, I haven't even eaten today. I haven't even, and half the time our outreach workers are building relationships first, because if we come in demanding and we're asking to read 283 pages and they're like, my kid doesn't have pencils, they're not gonna come to our meeting. but it's the level of practicality that we approach these meetings with and the relentlessness to keep showing up. So when they move up in their upward mobility, they can go and respond. It's just as simple as that. Eric's from Philadelphia. I was just working in Houston. When you go into these areas where the people are poor and they're desperate, they're not going to want to read this stuff. So we keep showing up. We keep sharing the information, but that's like the honest truth. We can go to Second Street Studios. We can say, hey, here's how tenant-based virtual assistance goes. Here's how all these programs work. It's on the city's website. We have it language accessible. They're like, I'm hungry. And that's so what I'm saying is that the information is there. We'll continue to dive deep into figuring out ways to get them accessible information, including switching up how we talk about it. Because even when we're putting out these plans to conduct meetings, they're like, well, I don't know Robert's Rules of Order. I don't know how to show up for public comment. I don't know any of these things. And we're helping them through that. We have a lot of individuals who spend a lot of time trying to get there, but your comments are well received.
Thank you. So based on that response, would you agree that the city needs to maybe reflect on its own equitable outreach practices?
I would say
Or I'm just saying,
Mhm.
right? Because trust me, I've been that kid that had $5 and that's all I had in my name. I had to figure out whether I got to put gas or food. Like I had that lived experience. And you're right. I'm not thinking about any first-time home buyer programs at that point. I'm not trying to figure out how to plant more trees so we have a better world. But I get that. But there should be a way, an equitable way to reach these communities that historically are suffering the most. And I only say this because this is something that I'm very passionate about. I've been here, I've been a commissioner a few years, and this is, if people know me, it's always homeless prevention and information, sending out information. And I still feel that, and this is a clear example of that, there's a lot of work to be done, and it's hard to kind of step away and do a self-reflection. But especially African American ancestry and Indigenous people, that's really close to my heart. And I feel that maybe we could add a little bit of urgency, so we could work on that. Thank you.
And Commissioner, I will say this, having worked with the gentleman beside me, not just because he's my boss, but he's someone, he and I, we meet every morning, and we have very strong conversations on pushing towards better outcomes, including having conversations with our partners that make them uncomfortable because they see the city of San Jose is shifting. That's it. So some of those conversations mean that the outcomes have to look different. And there have been budget changes where people have gone to him after he and I have had conversation. We say, you know what? These outcomes don't work for us. We have to shift how we're going to be doing outreach. We're going to shift all these things. So I think we're exactly where we need to be. Totally receive your comments, but I think we're headed down, especially with this involvement from this group, down the path we should.
Thank you so much, and awesome job, guys. Just throwing some ideas out there.
Okay. I'll make my comments super briefly. Yes, the numbers are bad, but they're better. They're better than before because before we would get like one Spanish speaker and one Vietnamese. So these numbers are way better than before. So thank you for going that extra mile and doing that outreach. I guess I don't know if you guys do this, but for the stakeholder meetings, the engagement groups, did you ever go back to those groups that got really good participation and ask them what did they do to get that good participation? And same, the ones that didn't get participation, did you all go back and be like, why did you only bring one person?
That is a question I haven't been asked. I will have to follow. That's a very good question. Let me follow. This is one of the ones I will follow up with the staff to see what feedback mechanisms we have to receive information so we can constantly improve. So that constant feedback loop. Let me get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. And then I like the survey, so I do have questions on the survey. On your question 10, you have other as an option, and you had 48 responses. The question was, what makes it difficult for you and other adults to keep work? What was, was there a, like, open-ended, what they could put, what the other option, what the other?
Yeah, I believe it was open-ended, but let me double
Okay.
check that because that's, I want to be sure that I'm not misstating something.
Okay. And then regarding transportation, I myself have done focus groups regarding healthcare, but transportation does come up as well as one of the things that are barriers for people not going to appointments, medical appointments. So, and I know in your survey, that also came up, 77 people, uh, they have some sort of barrier that relates around transportation. How are you all planning to use that information?
So some of what our funding actually funds, if you look in the packet, it's the Uplift program. So those are transportation mechanisms through VTA. So when we're seeing some of these things, you're also going to be able to read about how we're addressing those direct issues for the community.
Okay, thank you. And then on question 15, can you talk a little bit more about the acquisition and clearance of vacant lots that also received 170 respondents? That
The vacant lots, which,
Yeah,
so let me make sure.
Question 15,
Question 15.
and it's about infrastructure and neighborhood improvement needs. And there was a response, acquisition and clearance of vacant lots, and 170 respondents.
So sometimes we use, in terms of the respondents you're referring to?
Well,
Yeah.
170 respondents said it was a high.
Okay, yeah,
priority.
so we know there are some vacant lots throughout the city, particularly concentrated in some neighborhood. And where we can utilize qualifying CDBG funds to acquire some of those vacant lots, we will, and we have in the past. The department owns about 20 or so lots throughout the city for various uses.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions, but I don't know if you know, but the San Jose State does have a pantry for homeless students. I mean, that's somewhere where you can go out and in the future outreach to them.
Thank you.
Okay, those are all my questions. Okay, I think unless somebody else has any other questions, I think that was good.
Yeah, I just wanted to make some comments on the presentation from Commissioner Moore. I think this shows like kind of one lens of the picture, but there are a lot of reasons why renters don't report issues in their residences. I live in a rent-controlled building. And when I first moved in, I didn't have hot water for a couple of weeks and it was in the winter. Clear like violation. And I've had other such violations, but I was also dealing with domestic violence. And I know my rights as a renter, but I did not follow up with an agency because you only have so much time if you're also working and you're working full time. And I just want to put an emphasis that these organizations that exist are really important and that this is only like one picture of the data.
I'd like to say
Yeah, you
quickly,
can make it quick.
I agree that it's important to have a safety net for people. And so right now it's at the budget's at maybe 500,000. I think there needs to be some safety net. But what I'd really like to see you do is bring back Project Blossom to create better housing providers and bring back Rent Ready to create better renters instead of coming in after the fact and trying to save things, and also provide more rental assistance to keep people housed. I'm not saying those problems don't exist, but if they're not reported, these agencies are getting money and the problem's not being solved.
And we could we need to take a vote, right? No? Or we just recommend? Okay, I now close the public hearing. Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute recess. So I could go to the bathroom, so if you can come back at 7:25.
That's the next one on the agenda.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask.
Email me. We'll get together. Sure. Go, we'll chat.
Hi, how are
Same
you?
thing.
Eric Sullivan, nice to meet you.
Hey, Eric. How you
Okay.
doing? Good.
There were situations like.
Okay. I'm sorry, where are you? from again? I thought-
Do a lot. I'm just
I've
saying,
Spoken
like,
with Matt King.
Yep.
Frequently.
We're also the.
there were some really bad.
Okay.
quotes in there.
And-
Yeah, there
We
was
talked
no-
lots of times and- But since you. So.
And have you reached out to my assistant for that?
We did.
He told you no.
We were told, maybe you're blah, blah, blah.
Training them.
I'm sorry?
But,
Having
couple, yes,
better
actually we asked and never really heard back.
their fault.
So I'm asking
Look
you
at that.
now, person, back. The community.
There was. a
Or not just. Actually,
So
so
Okay.
I'm gonna testify at the next.
Sure.
But I just wanted to,
Mhm.
do like we met with.
Is it-
That's.
No fault.
Okay, I don't think you were shut out, so I did
Trap.
welcome to
Thank
meet
you
with you.
so much.
And Shelley will follow up and we'll schedule a meeting to have a half hour.
I mean, I'd have to see.
You're
the
welcome.
Whole
Mm.
picture. I know a lot of.
I know.
Cindy?
Hey,
Right, do you have the? Oh.
No.
Can we go to the bathroom?
Albert, I want to say.
Oh,
As a community activist. Yeah.
Gabriela.
We do. This is my first time here, but, I used to work,
Take the whole package for you.
I think it's online. I was
Yeah.
looking at it. It's,
Better
no,
paper.
it's for the whole. But I look at it.
Like I do. Auntie. But
A lot of things are happening.
The backward.
so before I was.
I know.
Never.
Are you? That's,
Yeah.
that's why.
Yeah, I'm like,
There you go.
I'll give you my card.
Yeah, do you have a
back.
card? I'm gonna testify at the next part of the meeting. Listen,
Sacred Heart is awesome.
Thought he was still.
Sacred Heart is awesome.
Very awesome. And I'm at the. beauty.
Oh, well, it's okay.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Albert.
Ally. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I've been learning the ropes a bit, but I really, I'm doing a lot.
That's what was going on.
Understood, no problem.
Very
Just
cool.
making sure it's right.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you.
No problem, no problem.
I myself. London. We're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
My,
I was lucky enough
I won't
that-
fix anything.
I was lucky enough to have a job, so I really. For it.
Right.
After that. everything I had-
I was gonna say something about the public comment.
So that's why I was like.
I've been killed this over and over.
Oh, you're- I don't have to.
Yeah. And that's like.
You got a lot of comments.
Mhm. Yeah, I've worked with Sacred Heart quite a. Yeah, I didn't say what
partnerships. And I ran the COVID program during the pandemic. Oh, cool. So I'm now at a housing profit, housing action.
Yeah.
And I live like really close to Sacred Heart. Yeah, I'm downtown on the second. Yeah, that's where I do all my donations. Oh,
But I
cool.
know we're.
I have a card with me. So.
What's your email?
We also know that.
Like. Yeah.
Ah.
Can I remember anything? But it's just as well. Most of
This is how I
that's
stay
beyond the
thinking.
purview of this commission. I went through the budget, so.
Told me the date.
Ones who need it.
Yeah.
So, that's all our.
And that's okay.
Like I found that.
Fortunately, our country doesn't quite work that way.
And the
All
other
the
thing.
funding
too
goes
is,
to the people that help us and
it's just
we're
like-
ready.
Yeah.
But it's.
Okay.
No,
but I'm
no,
not saying-
A lot of new issues for us. More work. Yeah.
Specifically on that proposal.
It's sometimes.
I'll just tell her to, I'll just write.
Proposal of jail.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I'll respond. No, sorry,
No, I'm having.
You're almost a year and a half.
I think
This is my second year on the
I'm really struggling to hear the dialogue.
Uh-huh.
and what's going on.
It seems we rubber stamp.
Yeah.
Yeah. They feed it to us.
Yes, sure.
And they want us to put comments, but a lot of our comments just kind of disappear.
May 21st. Okay, May 21st.
It's kind of nice. This is like,
We're making a recommendation.
you know, hey. This Italian grandfather. Out there pounding on, "Pick those potatoes."
My parents was.
I didn't want to.
And we are only an advisory committee.
Oh,
So
I'm-
they might
You
hear
know,
what we
what
have
was
to
the
say,
most
but that doesn't
disturbing?
mean
I
they
read
pay
all the comments.
Go out there and read that.
Is there were some really bad situations
Didn't work.
and they didn't follow up.
Did that.
They just,
This
if the,
measure for,
Yeah.
they wanted to pull a bunch of money out of.
the Law
homeless,
Foundation project.
Address the
all
creeks,
involved,
cleaning the creeks.
all three of
We
them.
all signed a letter saying we were.
I don't know. I have to go back and look. There was just like two or three really bad situations. Weren't very helping. They were.
Yeah, so we had.
Let it go. Like, well, they have the notes of what they did and what the person said, and they actually had verification that problem. It wasn't a ver- And most of them, you would think they would, right? That part bothered me, actually.
Oh, you could be an
I don't know, if that came across.
Anything on me, so I can go there and get.
Right.
And I-
Mm.
Whatever we decide to recommend, that doesn't mean, we can't decide what's gonna happen because the council does, yes. Yep.
And I was.
Excuse me, which group are you with?
No.
Kids, I was.
Make it hard.
Age 4, I don't realize.
Okay. We're gonna get back to item, real back. Oh, okay, we're gonna get back to Item B, Measure E spending plan. Okay. And the action is to recommend the city council to adopt a resolution amending section 22 of the city council policy 1-18 titled Operating Budget and Capital Improvement Program Policy to approve the following percentage allocations for the spending of Measure E revenues effective July 1st, 2025. And approve the following percentage allocations for the spending of Measure E revenues totaling 55 million anticipated to be received in the fiscal year 2025-2026. So we are gonna get started with a small presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll just, as by way of context, as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, the committee's already taken a vote on an opinion of the Measure E as recommended, what is included in this memorandum and what is included in the, I don't think we could go through this right now. Okay, so what is included in the memorandum that I'll briefly go through reflects exactly as we had discussed at the last meeting when the committee took a vote on the position of Measure E, which we've memorialized and will include in the comments to City Council. So with that, what is included in this memorandum reflects what we had discussed before, with the majority of the funds moving over into the support of shelter to help mitigate the impacts of the city budget deficit. You'll see the allocations of where Measure E has been baselined to $55 million and where that reallocation is occurring, with continuing support being provided to our prevention services that we invest in partnership with the county. In addition, as this policy was formally represented in response to the March budget message to council during the public hearing budget overview that occurred this prior Monday. And as the process moves forward into next week's round of public hearings on different components of the budget, the full consideration of the budget will be taken up to council on June 10th.
Thank you. We're gonna open up to public comment. And step up to the mic and state your name, please.
Thank you. I didn't see a form,
Oh,
so
and sorry. Wait until Mindy, let's set the timer. We usually don't get
it's okay. I
comments.
didn't see a little form to write on, so I'm just gonna say, my name is Albert and Carlson, and I'm
Hold on,
a
Albert.
resident of San Jose and also a member of SHAC, Sacred Hearts Housing Action Committee, for a couple of years now. So we've been really strong in believing in that. The city has always been very strong into really supporting working families and people who are lower income people. We feel like the mayor's plan is actually shockingly poorly planned, and doesn't actually address the real issues of homelessness. It basically creates a system of like what we call churn, where people go into a shelter, then they come out of a shelter, they go back into a shelter, because without permanent housing, you actually just stay homeless most of your life. And I understand, in San Antonio, they claim to have a different model for that, but I researched that too, totally different. So I know that, including people like Eric, who's going to advocate for that. Trust me when you say, look at it closely before you agree with anything that's happening. But over and over, that people become unhoused, and most people become unhoused, not for one reason or another, right? Everyone's got a different reason why they become unhoused. And there's reasons why that, in fact, City of San Jose previously, under the previous housing director, was actually really effective in terms of saying, we're going to do rent subsidies if we got it. We're going to do like legal support if we need it, right? But we're going to do everything that's called prevention to keep people from becoming unhoused in the first place. In fact, if you look at the point in time homeless survey, which I'm sure the staff has done, the last 5 years, 950 people who are quote unquote unhoused become unhoused because of an eviction. So if you literally, you could drop 1,000 people from being unhoused if you just support basic legal support, right? And what we've looked at SHAC, national studies, we talked to national leaders, we have our study about it, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to just encourage all of you to look at this and say, we're going to oppose, we're asking you as a community, oppose the mayor's idea of saying using all Measure E money to go away just for shelters, even though shelters is important.
Thank you. Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your time.
And I'm sorry, can you please repeat your name one more time and where you're from?
Sure. My name is Albert Carlson, and I'm representing SHAC, which is Sacred Heart Housing Action Committee.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, so for commissioners, we did decide to allocate 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes for this item. You'll get to go around twice. You don't have to use your whole 10 minutes, but you can use your whole 10 minutes in the first round. So just if you can just be as concise so you don't eat up your time the first time. And we can, yes? Yes, 10 minutes in total. Yes, yes. Okay, and Mindy is, well, you don't have to take the 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm not seeing. your
I would hope you don't
Fair
take the
enough.
10 minutes.
Fair.
10 minutes each.
So you have a good morning.
Yeah, I'm hoping because we've already discussed this a couple times before, so you don't have to take the 10 minutes, but you can if you want to. So we'll get started with Commissioner
Okay, me too. Oh, we'll start again with me. All right.
You want to start this way?
So, yeah, I don't have much to say. I mean, I mentioned it in the last meeting. I think we're in a tough situation budget-wise. And that's why we're here, right? In terms of what are we going to do with Measure E funds and reallocating them. I am 100% in agreement with the recommendations and with the mayor's priorities. I do believe it will help. I think, again, we don't really have much of a choice. If we had more money and, a bigger budget, and we weren't running a deficit, we could probably have a completely different discussion. At this point, I feel this is the only viable way forward. So I would just, I would lend my support to the recommendations in the budget.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gabriel?
So I don't have the right draft that shows when our Measure E funds started being reallocated, it was a lower percent, maybe I think 15% or 10%. The first time in 2021 or the first, and one of these histories of allocating the majority of the funds were dedicated to permanent housing. And then it started being reversed to where permanent housing got a fraction and now getting zero. Me is so extreme because building interim housing is really important to house people immediately, but forcing people to go to these places doesn't serve the person. So I think that overspending in term housing is very extreme. If it was 60%, I could support it, but 90%, it seems excessive in general. Because it's not looking ahead as far as once people are stabilized, even stabilization takes a couple of years. They need a permanent place to stabilize, and interim housing is not permanent housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Finn?
So 5% of the revenue goes towards basically supporting the plan. 10% is for homelessness prevention, and 90% goes to homeless sheltering and support.
Commissioner, can you speak into the mic a little more?
Sorry, guess my mic doesn't pick up very well. And then any remaining revenue not budgeted within the homeless sheltering and support program can be allocated basically for long-term housing. And I have to just echo what you just heard. I think that 90%, although the need is there, we've totally just taken Measure E and flipped it over instead of providing permanent housing, which what Measure E basically was written for, even though it went into general fund and can be used for pretty much anything related to homelessness. It seems like we're just dropping that whole part about making permanent housing. And I also find that abhorrent. That's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Sapirman?
Thank you. I first wanted to disclose that my organization did submit a comment letter on the budget message, but I did not work on that. My comments align with previous comments. I see a lot of importance and value that the mayor's office is working to address the crisis we have and get people off of the street. But I think just based off of all the organizations that are in this space trying to look towards short-term and long-term solutions, that we need to, because we're forced to pick between the two, have the most equitable approach possible, and have equal funds and not divert all funds to short-term solutions. Just wanted to also recognize, really appreciate public commenter who came out tonight and appreciate the work of Sacred Heart. But I think we definitely need a balanced approach. We need long-term solutions. A lot of short-term solutions don't serve residents, but it does serve some residents, and that's important too.
Thank you. Commissioner Dawson?
Thank you very much. I left 2 pages of questions at home, so you'll all be pleased about that. And I'm sure Director Sullivan would have said that's beyond the scope of this commission. So stick to the point. So I am going to stick to the point. What troubles me the most, and I've seen many downturns in this city, but the pain has been shared equally. The pain is not shared equally in this budget. We are wiping out Measure E, ignoring the original intent of what we told to the voters. And I give the budget office credit because that February 12th presentation, the city manager's 5-year forecast, other items has been very clear. We are taking this Measure E money to reduce the budget gap so we don't have to make other more difficult decisions, reducing core city services and potentially laying people off. So in essence, we're kicking the can down the road rather than making some tough decisions this year. And also we are solving 2 years of budget. I believe the direction from administration is to plan for next year's solving half of the next fiscal year's budget crisis, which is in her document, if you read the original part of it. So it's an extra whammy on this year. And believe me, this city has been blessed with incredible budget people and sound budgeting practices. A great man named Larry Lisenby, who our current city manager is a protege of his, rest in peace, Larry, used to beat into everybody that you have to have flexibility in budget. I'm not upset about a one-time hit, switching projects around. What upsets me is the permanency in a Measure E, which has no sunset. When they say permanent, we're talking forever. And I am still unclear, and I'm hoping I can get an answer. Budgets are passed by a simple majority vote. However, council policies, and you do have a new council policy here, which is adopted virtue of a 7-4 vote on the March budget message. So when we get to next fiscal year and we have a different council that makes another sea change in their thinking, because this is a total sea change in what previous councils have thought, completely different direction. Is it going to take a majority vote to change allocations, or will it take 2/3 to have to bring back percentage allocations into council policy? So that's a question, which is still to me fuzzy. And then the second part I'm really worried about, and I'll go ahead and get this out there, Eric. Let's see. Oh, I've got time left, don't I? The other thing that I am wondering is, I am deeply troubled, as a lot of groups are, about the housing element. Because as former Mayor Tom McHenry once said in the 1980s, the budget is your most important policy document of the year. It says your priorities. And we are saying in our priorities, we don't care about permanent supportive. We don't care about other things. We don't care about soft story retrofit, which was going to get Measure E money to help the mom and pops. We don't care about anything else. Our priority is to fund operational cost. And I worry could we fall out of compliance with the housing element, because we are charged with building at all income levels. And we no longer appear to have a plan in place to build at all income levels. And I will stop right there for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Trent?
Yes, I'd like to get clarity. Are we actually voting on anything tonight?
Can you stop her clock?
Oh, thank you.
Of all the commissioners, I'm pretty sure Commissioner Dawson is going to be the one that uses her 10 minutes. But so I just wanted to confirm, yeah, are we actually voting on this tonight, or is this just the presentation?
This is the presentation, and since the committee took a vote already on this policy last week, we are just bringing that forward when we come to council with it.
Got it. Okay. Well, then, I mean, I just stay right off the bat. I agree 100% with, I think it's been uniform across so far from the comments we've heard, or almost, that this proposal just sucks. So, the questions I have really are focused more on the dollars and cents, though. The Mercury News released an article just yesterday, mentioning here that I think the city is closing out any kind of budget deficit by redirecting all Measure E dollars towards interim homelessness solutions. So I guess what I really wanted to understand there is, if this change to Measure E did not occur, would we have operated at a deficit?
Yes.
And so I'm guessing where I'm trying to understand in that deficit is, we have the same pot of money, or at least the same total amount of money. How is it that if we had not shifted Measure E funds, we would have then been operating at a deficit? Is it just because the change that we could not make was to reduce the amount we would have to pay to operate shelters?
So just to provide some context for the question, the way the fund structure works in this city is that the Measure E allocation goes into a fund. There's a general fund supported by multiple streams. There's the various city and state fund dollars that come into various departments, particularly within the housing department. Less than 10% of our general operating funds within the housing department are general fund dollars, with the exception of the shelter system, which is primarily general fund supported at this point. So when you look at the budget deficit, which on the last account, based on Monday's presentation, was just about $45 million, without the reallocation of the Measure E funds, then that budget deficit, that gap would have to come from other departments. And what has been withheld by reallocating Measure E funds is further reductions to other departments. So there were no eliminations of jobs. Everyone stayed steady. There were minor cuts and cost-cutting measures across the departments, as we've been operating on the cost-cutting measures of roughly 10 to 15% since the city manager's initial memorandum came out in January, and that has stabilized. So we didn't, the department specifically within the housing department didn't lose any employees. In fact, we added more employees to expand out our housing outreach and engagement program to homeless individuals, so we can bring them more into shelter systems. while other departments had, positions frozen, but none eliminated. So this provided a substantial way to fill the gap within the overall fund for the city without having to have any substantial cost reductions across the departmental funds.
On all good, of course, be able to move money around in such a way we can avoid layoffs. I think that's a positive of what otherwise isn't very positive for me. At least what I'm reading through the Mercury News article, it leaves the impression that the deficit is due to the fact that we have a high commitment of dollars to interim solutions. And I think what I'm trying to get to is that an accurate assessment?
I think on a $5.57 billion budget to assign what is an annual cost of $92 million in operating funds that is seeded from the general fund, to say there's a direct causation of deficit spending would be a difficult allocation in terms of an assessment of budget values.
I mean, we're focusing just on the general funds, though, rather than the entire budget. We know a lot of it has already been allocated or earmarked, right, for things like pensions and things like that. But if we're looking at just general dollar funds, I mean, what I'm hearing is if we hadn't moved Measure E dollars, there would be a deficit. But because we moved Measure E dollars, there is not a deficit. I mean, that part for me doesn't appear to be, there doesn't appear to be any contradiction to that point.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So with that, then, this still begs the question for me, and we did touch on it at the last meeting, right? But this is an ongoing commitment. Shelters are annual costs. There's going to be staffing, there's maintenance, there's other things that go with it. The proposal, as I read it, does say that Measure E dollars would be directed towards the operating cost of shelters first, but the wording doesn't really put a cap on that. So let me ask this. I mean, based on the proposed changes to the Measure E spending plan, are we going to continue to increase our commitment to interim shelters just by continuing to build a whole bunch more?
What the budget represents and the cap on table 1 identifies is the 90% cap on the utilization of Measure E funds to support shelter construction and operations. So that is the identified cap. If mayor and council make the decision to further expand the existing shelter system beyond the 1,400 beds that we have coming online throughout this year through December 31st, that is for a decision of mayor and council to make.
Okay, so as it stands, this is the cap just for this year?
This is a cap based on the language of the policy, which shows the permanent shift based on this reallocation. As always, as articulated within the memorandum, council can vote to change it at any time.
Right, which they've done repeatedly, right? Which to the chagrin of folks who believed in the original purpose of Measure E. I guess what I'm trying to point to is, if we're saying that as a policy, we're just going to make the primary goal of Measure E to fund interim shelters, and then once we meet all of that need, we can go ahead then and shift to affordable housing. Are we going to at some point stop the expansion of interim solutions so that there is some opportunity for Measure E funds to actually go towards affordable housing? Or is it just going to be an ever-growing commitment?
Again, that is a policy determination for mayor and council. I will note that the city will spend $148 million on the advancement of permanent housing solutions, creating and funding over 1,300 units.
Right. I think I've gotten that number 2, though I do also wonder, I guess, what is lost or how many units that comes down from based on the current reallocation. I don't think we need to answer that question for this purposes of this discussion. So we are looking at then a proposal to permanently shift Measure E funds. And I didn't know if I got this question answered because I know that Commissioner Dawson and I had spoken about this, but based on the wording of this proposal, and it's saying that future budget allocations would just be subject to standard budgeting practices. Does that mean that any shift in Measure E funds can be adopted by a simple majority, or does it have to still meet the heightened standard?
Based on the budget memorandum, which does not reflect a change in the existing council policy related to the majority votes required for shifts and Measure E funding, that continuation as dictated in page 6 reads the following: the 60-day notice to public hearings and 2/3 vote, so long as other spending is allocated in the preservation of existing and creation of new affordable housing. So the 2/3 vote requirement remains within the policy criteria.
Got it. Okay. All right. So then you've just switched now to process questions. I mean, I think the last time we presented on Measure E, what you had shared was that the council's vote on the mayor's budget message was sufficient to shift Measure E spending priorities. Is that still the position, or is the council actually going to go back and revisit how Measure E should be allocated?
The June 10th vote is the final budget vote. The budget provided by the city manager's office is a reflection of the council direction given in the March budget message.
So that means then at this point, every vote that the council makes, it's going to be viewing all of this in a package. If there was at any point where a procedural vote or a budget vote did not meet the 2/3 requirement, does that negate any assumption or presumption that the council approved?
It's not a package of votes. The Measure E allocation has its own separate policy, and on the June 10th meeting will be voted on separately accordingly.
Okay, thank you. That's actually what I really wanted to get clarified.
Thank you. Commissioner Breler.
Okay, I have a few questions for you. If we used all of the money for Measure E, we would still be in a deficit as far as what we need for homelessness in general, correct? Like that still doesn't meet the need.
What do you mean by homelessness in general?
Well, because I feel like the last time you guys presented numbers to this, you showed us how even if we allocate everything that we had towards this problem, we are still at a deficit of what it requires to get everybody off the streets and to get services and all of that. Even if we used every bit of the money that we have and then some, we're not going to actually have enough.
Given the total demand population as calculated by the department at 5,447 individuals, which reflects both inflows of the homelessness as well as housing placements through exits of the homelessness system, the total amount of shelter beds available by the end of this calendar year will still not meet that total demand of those experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. And when you guys were talking about these interim housing, I believe you had mentioned that they don't have a time limit though, even though they are not foundational homes built, to last for 30 years, there's still not a time limit for the people that are in them. They can take the amount of time they need. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. And I just want to speak to the council. I hear we are in a terrible time in history, to be frank and honest. And in this city right now, we made a lot of money off this tax and we really enjoyed it for a few years, but real estate has been crap for 3 years. So this fund has it has not been as prolific as it has been in years past. And we really beefed things up for those moments. Now, just like life and just like life, the reason why people rent is because they can't afford to buy. And sadly, in San Jose right now, we can only afford to get rentals for our unhoused because we cannot afford to buy. We cannot afford to build is what I'm saying. And that's probably going to become even harder as we have housing costs. The cost to build is 30 and 40% higher year over year. It is becoming an unbelievable problem, but our unhoused are still living on the streets and they are at risk every day. And so I understand wanting the long-term solution. And to that, I am sad that there's nothing really going to long-term solutions. Even when I do my own budgets, as I'm in the middle of paying off debt that I'm really upset about, I still take a little bit and I put it towards the future, just a little bit. A lot less than I'd like to, but a little bit, because I know that there will be a future that I'm going to have to I'm going to have to face it. And San Jose is going to have to face it too. My hope is that as we face it, we have more real estate transactions that help to fund those challenges as they come forward. But I do appreciate, I'm sure the council is getting a lot of slack for this, and I see this as we are hemorrhaging. And when you are hemorrhaging, you have to stop the bleed. That's the first thing you have to do on triage. And we're in triage. And I can't wait for the day when we do this for several years and we stop the bleeding so that we can reattach the arm. Okay. And so I'm just speaking to, some people were saying, maybe it's not caring or, priorities. And I think that the city and our leaders, they have priorities. It's to help the city. The city's problems are just too big for our budget to manage. And that's sad. And it's not a problem that's exclusive to San Jose, and it's not exclusive to California, the United States, or even the world. So I just want to, if my public comment is to say, yes, I wish we had more money for the future. And I also understand that it is important to stop the bleed as best we can, which is still not even enough. So thanks.
Commissioner Moore?
I agree with what Jen said 100%, so I won't repeat that. I have a question on page 3. The 47 million revised policy, how many people will that house? Ballpark.
So the provision, the existing expenditures on a per bed basis across the existing portfolio and projected out over the assumption of the addition of roughly 1,200 more beds by the end of the current calendar year. If you take the 47 million, divide that by roughly an average cost of about $35,000 per bed, this provides sustaining shelter for, what is that number of people? Roughly, probably close to about 900 people, about thereabouts.
900,
Mm.
okay. And the 148 million you mentioned that are building 1,300 units, that's permanent, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I agree with the direction you're taking for the reasons that you've mentioned before and that Jen just mentioned. So I'm kind of a data geek, and there are 2 facts that have crossed my path as I've done research. One is homelessness dropped because some states stopped doing housing first. But where we did housing first in California, it increased. And that's kind of the hemorrhaging part. Like Reagan always said, every time we house someone, 2 more people show up. So I like the idea of stopping the bleed first, and we're also building just as many permanent units. The other reason I like it is because in the past, there were permanent shelters built where everyone was housed together, the financially strapped with young kids, the drug addicts, the drug dealers, and there are the most calls for service. And I'm not going to name the buildings, but I know what buildings they are. And I like your approach because you're taking a more methodical approach to this with mental illness and addiction and things like that. So I also looked at homelessness by decade and the closing of the mental institutions by decade. And literally, I created a graph. 300,000 were in mental institutions in the 70s, and now they're on the streets. And I know people who were put on the streets. And my very dear friend's brother, they tried to put her in prison. So I'm getting the chills because I like that there's something to house more people. And I guess I've said enough, but I 100% agree with what you're doing until we stop hemorrhaging, and then the goal is to house everyone. Thank you.
Commissioner Navarro?
So I want to make, you can hear me? Okay. So I would like some clarification because and I apologized for not making last month's meeting, but I'm looking at the notes and what was recommended last month that no reallocation decision of Measure E fund be made permanent for the coming fiscal year. Does that mean that our body is recommending no changes and you've noted that?
That
Or
is what is the motion from the last meeting, correct?
that no, okay, but I'm understanding be made permanent for the coming fiscal year. I don't see that reallocation percentages stay the same. Is that correct? Commissioner Tran, is that what can you clarify your motion from last month?
Yeah, the motion was just that any reallocation that the council approves this year be for 1 year only, instead of being a permanent reallocation moving forward.
Okay, so that is not the same as saying no reallocation be made, is that correct?
Yeah, just whatever change the council wants to make, do it 1 year at a time.
Okay, but that was not a no to any change.
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to make a recommendation that no changes in the percentage allocations for spending on Measure E revenues for the coming fiscal year be made at all. Can I get a second?
Just to clarify, does that mean then that the spending levels would be
Would be the same.
at fiscal year 2024-25 levels, or revert
Correct,
back to the
correct.
original 2020
To
allocation?
remain the same as our current levels.
At current level? I'll second that.
Okay.
Point of order, if this was already voted on,
It wasn't, that's what I got clarification on.
what, I thought you said that
It was.
the council voted on it. The council voted on it on Monday. City council did.
So no, the city council did not vote on it on Monday. This was
Oh.
presented on Monday at the last HCDC committee. This committee already took a vote on the motion by Commissioner Tran.
Right, which is different what I just made. Yes. If-
My last motion didn't reference any particular percentages. It was only that whatever changes the council implement be for this year only. Just Commissioner Navarro's motion is to preserve the spending percentages from the current fiscal year to the next.
Should we take a vote?
Question?
What happened?
A question?
Sure.
If we go back to last year, does that mean we're going to spend millions of dollars at cleaning up creeks again? I'm not into going from what we had last year. I was opposed to what we did last year, and I'm not going to vote to have us go back to what we did last year. So if you can make that motion a little different, maybe go back to the original spending plan or something, but I
What
don't
was
wanna
the
see-
permanent-
I don't want to see money going back to remove homeless people from the creeks.
The original, and if for reference, the original allocation is this stated in table 1, page 3. Or is that?
No, that's existing.
Yeah, no. Wait.
Page 1. This one.
I thought the table 1 on page 3 was the original allocation.
No, but I think this motion clearly maintains the majority on affordable housing development. Because this was already agreed on by all current council members. This is where they settled last time. And if you remember our last meeting, I mean, we had public comment for like 2-3 hours. Enough for me to go to Gilroy, work a couple hours and drive back just by the time when that public comment was ended. So that's why I think it's easier, because this has already been agreed on by all the current council members. And once the mayor pushed the goalpost further, and this is kind of where they settled, I know this is more of a goalpost push, but what I want to make it clear is that we want it to be left alone. Because the mayor is still going to push the goalpost as he did, and the numbers are going to settle somewhere in between.
The mayor and council are going to do what they're going to do regardless of what we tell them.
Right, but we want to make
So
the statement that we don't want any changes made to the current percentage allocations.
I agree with that. I just don't want
It's
to
just easier.
I just don't want to see money going back where we were spending it on cleaning up creeks. That's
Yeah.
all.
The Commissioner Navarro, can you restate what you're proposing?
Sure.
What's the process? Because there's a motion and a second, so doesn't that have to be voted on? Or can you both
We can-
withdraw it?
No, they can ask for a friendly amendment, but which right now we're not doing. But I could reread the motions.
So I would like to just point of order here for a couple of points here. You as a commission are, just to clarify a few things. One is, as mentioned during the prior meeting, when the prior motion was made, the decision of council on the 7-4 vote, and Grace can correct me here accordingly, set forth the criteria that is reflected in this budget. This budget was presented to council in response to that criteria set by council back in March. On this past Monday, as the public hearings for the budget process proceeds forward this week and next week. This is what is also the recommendation of the administration for resolving the existing deficit within the budget. So this body can take another motion to further clarify and or adjust your opinions on this. Those opinions will be duly noted.
Thank you. So do you want to reread it?
Yes.
Okay, so my motion is to recommend that no changes in percentage allocations for spending of Measure E revenues. Sorry.
Okay, she's got to be able to subscribe,
Okay.
so.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll start again. To recommend that no changes in percentage allocations for the spending of Measure E revenues effective July 1st, 2025 be made and to match the current fiscal year, to keep the percentage allocations as the current fiscal year. If,
July 1st, 2025.
yeah, that no changes of the percentage allocations for the spending of Measure E revenues effective July 1st, 2025. So no changes to be made and to make sure it reflects the current fiscal year percentage allocations. If you could fix that run-on sentence.
Recommend that no changes in percentage allocation for the spending of Measure E revenues effective July 1st, 2025 be made and that it reflects the current fiscal year percentage allocation. That's
If
all.
you want to share that? Ms.
Yeah,
Speaker?
I will share
Make
that right
sure- Get our English experts here.
Okay. See that? Yeah.
And can I get a Commissioner Navarro, get a second?
I'll second for the sake of discussion, but I actually do agree with Commissioner Finn.
So is there a second or not? Because if there's no
There's a
second, there's no
second-
vote.
Second.
Okay. And we open for discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, if I may, then just kind of simplify it. I do think if we just kind of suggest that we go back to the original intended allocations, it just simplifies things a lot. Just because last year was also a one-year allocation that dealt with unique circumstances. And I think a lot of us opposed about what happened last year. Might be easier to focus on what's reflected in Table 1.
Yes.
That's a change to what is proposed, so that means you have withdrawn your second.
I was asking for a friendly amendment. Is that what you're asking for?
Friendly amendment.
Sure. Whichever works, get us to that point.
So
Well,
to match Table 1.
Friendly amendment is not a substantive change to the language. What he's proposing is a return not to Table 1, which therefore it is not a friendly amendment of non-substantive change.
Okay, so I need to reword my motion. So recommend that allocations, let me read this correctly. Sorry. Or was I?
Just,
So, okay, so my motion is that percentage allocations for spending of Measure E revenues match the previous fiscal year?
The
So is that
original allocation.
the original allocation.
you don't want to just refer to table 1, which is so easy for.
That's the existing policy, right?
Yeah, just point of
That's
order.
different.
I'm really confused. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so right now, I'm going based off Commissioner Tran's request or suggestion that instead of, because the current fiscal year was a temporary one-year change, is that correct, Mr. Tran? So then we're moving the goalposts back to the original percentage allocations is what we're doing.
Yeah. We can, as
What
reflected. in
year
Table
was
1.
that? Excuse me.
What was the original allocation?
Yeah, as reflected in Table 1, under the existing policy column.
was affordable housing 75%, homelessness prevention 10%, and homeland support 15%.
This one,
Correct.
right?
Can it say existing policy instead of a revised?
Page 4.
To make it so everyone understands we're looking at it visually. It's a friendly amendment. The original allocation is meaningless because. of
It doesn't
what-
reference.
When. So I would suggest that we go, I'm sorry, I'm not recognized by the chair.
No.
Chair,
Just trying
Chair,
to help get
pause.
the
Yeah.
end goal.
So are you saying it's easier to actually have the percentages on this motion
What I.
or reference to table 1?
Would be, because again, we have to remember that this has changed at least 3 times. So if we simply look at the document in front of us, and if you reference your motion to the percentage allocations and existing policy as noted in table 1, reference this document.
That's
Forgot what
perfect.
the item.
Are you
number-
able to change that?
So we're just clear on what everybody
Yeah.
knows what we're voting on. Would that be acceptable?
Yes, I'll accept that.
So match the existing allocation as reflected in table 1,
No,
Existing
table
policy.
1,
See,
existing policy.
Labeled existing policy allocation.
allocation percentages.
Match
There you
the,
go.
match the labeled existing policy. Allocation as reflected in table 1.
Can you show that on the screens to see if I'm looking at the same thing? When you say table 1.
right here.
It's on page 3, table 1
Okay.
of the packet.
Okay. Recommend that no changes in percentage allocation recommend that no changes percentage allocation for measure E revenues effective. Okay, recommend the allocation for the spending in measure E match the label, so I'll take this out.
Yep, perfect.
Recommend
That's not right.
Recommend that the allocation for the spending of Measure E revenues effective July 1st, 2025 match the labeled existing policy allocation as reflected in Table 1. That sound?
I would agree with that if it was table 2.
You can vote.
Okay, so this is getting a little out of control. So a couple things here. First, you need to clarify what it is your language that you want to proffer. So that way that language as stated can then proceed to a second considerations or friendly amendments or amendments overall that are not friendly or other language. That's way we can just follow kind of procedure and process here. Because at the moment we seem to be creating this sort of at a committee, and that's not the most efficient path forward for getting to clarity on what is the proposed recommended language.
I think we have the correct language as needed for clarification.
Okay, so based on that, now we need to take a vote as whether or not there is a second. Yes.
Can we clarify what table 1 and what form you're talking about? Which piece of paper? We got
can see that
we
from
got
over there.
100 pages here, and there are several table 1s listed in all of
No,
them.
guys.
It's
No,
the memo.
I
Let's
think
reference the
writing it
agenda
down, referencing the memo.
Yeah, we're only on one subject matter.
Then you have to amend the language of your amendment here, your motion.
Allocation effective on table 1 on the memorandum
For proposed
Pa-
spending plan. and
package,
3 real projects.
subject proposed spending plan. And identify which memorandum. A little bit longer now, but that way we're all clear which document with what title.
Just a point of order.
Yes.
Chair.
Commissioner Dawson?
We need to label it with the specific agenda item, which would be where is it? If we could label table 1 in item item 7B, V11.B.
Yeah.
There you go.
B11.B.
Everybody got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Commissioner.
Do we have a second?
Yes.
Commissioner Tran? we could have a discussion. Discussion. Okay. If there's no discussion, then we'll just take a vote if there's no discussion.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend that the allocation for the spending of Measure E revenues effective July 1st, 2025 match the labeled existing policy allocation as reflected in Table 1 on item 7B Measure E spending plan. Okay, I will start taking the vote. Commissioner Finn,
Yes.
Commissioner Dawson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mowad,
No.
Commissioner Navarro,
Yes.
Commissioner or Vice Chair Partita.
Yes?
You skipped Wheeler.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had,
That's okay.
I vote no.
you're not here yet. Okay, Commissioner Beeler. No. Oops. Let me- Okay. Commissioner Tran,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
No.
Commissioner Saperman,
Yes.
Commissioner Gabriel.
No.
Okay, the motion passes 6-4.
Okay.
Point of order, do we lose the rest of our time?
Yes.
Yes.
You decided. Let's go to the next thing.
Okay.
And who seconded that?
Thank you.
I feel like there wasn't enough discussion.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so we'll move on to item C, which is the middle income housing strategy status report. And the action is to accept the city's moderate income. Oh, wait, sorry. The recommendation is to review and provide recommendations regarding the city's moderate income, also known as the middle income or workforce housing development strategy staff report.
Great, thank you, Chair. So I'll go through a brief presentation here on the proposed middle income housing strategy status report. So middle income is basically our moderate income workforce at the area median income range of 81% to 120%. And so I'll go through a brief strategy here. So as we're talking through this, what we're really focusing on is as we look at the overall housing continuum, we're looking at that transition from sort of the top end of restricted affordable rents that go up to 110% of AMI and then into market rate rents and home ownership opportunities. I will note that in the last roughly 6 months, we're seeing more and more market rate developments that are coming up under our inclusionary housing ordinance that the projected rents are actually falling at 110% AMI or below because our market rate rents have flatlined over the last couple of years. So we're getting more sort of default market rate developments that are coming under affordability levels. And so that's where this segment of the housing continuum, this report focuses on. And so what the recommendations kind of go through, so as we go through quick here, the definitions. So under the housing element doesn't have a mandate or requirement for the production of units. What the housing element does is it requires and provides a mandate for creating a platform and an environment for the production of units. Because governments don't produce units, we finance, we fund, we gap fund, but it is the private sector and private development that actually creates the overall units. So how does government create that environment and that platform for the production of housing units? And part of that housing element requirement is investing in our middle and moderate income housing. And so this you'll see is a quick breakdown of what, as I had mentioned, is our middle income families. So these are family at 81% to 120% AMI. This is 145,000 at the low end range for a family of 4 to 217,000. So this is capturing a lot of public employees. The overwhelming majority of my staff fall into this range, particularly at our middle manager and manager levels, as well as a lot of police officers, fires, librarians, teachers. This is a lot of just middle income middle-class families within the city of San Jose. And so this just provides greater detail as to what is that total amount of need within the city. So nearly 60,000 families fall within this range of middle income in the city of San Jose. And homeownership, as they are occupying both Class A and Class B properties, we're finding more and more higher income families occupying Class B properties, thereby raising the rents of Class B properties and effectively buying down that available supply of units, making Class C properties also more expensive because they're not able to have throughput into homeownership opportunities. And so we're further, because of the compression of supply, compressing and increasing rents. And so this is just further evidence to show that the moderate income family tiers are larger than our typical households. Middle-class families in San Jose fall into demands for basically 2 bedrooms and 3 bedroom type households, but the market right now doesn't produce those size. Most of the rental units produced in the last few years in San Jose are usually 0s, 1s, and 2 bedrooms. So they have a higher unit size need typically to go into starter homes. They can't transition into that because we don't have home ownership opportunities for middle-class families in San Jose. So most of them are renting and renting at the lower levels within our rental market. So this just provides further detail on what the diversity is. It is a very diverse group of middle-class families within San Jose, further representing diversity. So cost burdens. So this group, like many groups who are lower down in the AMIs, this group is also experiencing cost burdens as well as rent has risen continuously over the last year because of the lack of overall housing supply within the market. So then here are some challenges. As I mentioned a few of them, in 2024, we had 0 market rate starts, so we weren't bringing on more units. We had a lot of affordable units that were prior year funded that were under construction. Those are coming online this year, which is going to provide more opportunity for throughput from our shelter system into permanent housing, but we still need more production at all levels, at all points within the housing continuum. And until we get that production, we're going to continue to have rent buydowns, individuals of higher incomes going into lower end class units, further creating more pressure on Class B and Class C properties. Class C properties represents a huge portion of our rent stabilized units of roughly 40,000, where vacancy rates have now dipped below 4%. That is incredibly low. It means there is an extremely high demand there. But since we have so many pressures coming from the bottom up and from the top down, because we don't have sufficient supply to build out more housing, we're creating further increases in rent, and we don't have enough home ownership opportunities. We don't have individuals moving in from rental into home ownership. So they're staying stagnant in a limited amount of supply, which is why we're creating just ever increasing in rents over the last few years. And so some of the types of missing middle housing that we need is to, as we are transitioning, kind of moving past single family homes, what is the plethora of middle income housing that we need to build of both rental and home ownership? Because we're not always going to do podium builds in downtown going 150 feet in the air or 15 stories. Where do we have stuff in the middle that can be quick turn, quick development? Townhomes, as an example, is a product that pencils very well. You get to much greater density than you would have received through single family homes. And where else do we build smaller types of rental units, as you see kind of the diversity of sizes that are easily to finance and pencil at the moment and can come online much quicker? So how do we fill that gap in order to provide more housing stock for our middle class families? And some of the proposed strategies are the following. Since we don't typically provide direct loans or financing to this group, what we're looking for is to ease the pathway for developers who are bringing this work and these products and these projects to us. How do we get them through the system quicker? The city imposes roughly about $26,000 worth of fees on every unit that comes through the city. For all the various 6 departments, you have to touch it. Housing, PBCE, PNRS, DOT, Public Works. You go through the list. So where do we streamline some of that in order to update that? And one of the ways that we could do that in the housing department is updating our inclusionary housing ordinance. One of the directions we received from the March budget message is to expand the AMI scale, going lower down to 60% from the current 100% AMI, going higher up to the 100% AMI, so that we capture a broader diversity of income levels as we're fostering more mixed income communities of both market rate and restricted affordable. Where do we continue to grow our ADU program, as well as expanding more density bonus opportunities for moderate income families? And then the last two are really looking at some reforms. Another part of that missing middle income is that it's difficult to build condos in the state of California, particularly in San Jose, due to our existing construction deficit liabilities. So how do we look at those construction defect liability laws? And where do we look at ways in which to build out much more of the various typologies, as I showed in kind of that graphic, of missing middle housing? And so that's sort of the report of the strategies that we're going to put forth to expand our supply of middle income housing.
Thank you. We'll start on this side. Commissioner Navarro?
I wasn't prepared yet, but as we're looking at these proposed actions, have you defined any of these proposed actions, how to equitably assist folks that have been traditionally redlined from certain communities, people of low income that have been discriminated, like had credit discrimination? Is there anything in these proposed actions where you're going to put an equity lens and help people that have traditionally not been able to even come close to being afford a starter home at the current times?
So under the department policy related to our racial, social, and equity goes, all policies are given that consideration, which is why the previous slide identified what are the existing broad diversity of groups who don't have access to homeownership. And as we expand and implement some of these policies, that is always taken into consideration to ensure we have proportional impacts on those communities.
Got it. Now, I know, I don't know if, as we're looking to increase more housing inventory, and especially for small starting, families that are just starting, I know there's, at least there's certain communities in our city where it's, I would say, developers that are buying homes and then tearing them down and rebuilding new, bigger homes, which then follows that domino effect of putting more pricing pressure down market for rental units. Is there any incentive that could be done where developers add an extra, like an EDU in the property that they're building, or added an extra door where they could rent out, like say a studio as an income generating incentive for them? Is that something that could be done? Since I know I'm seeing homes being torn down in my neighborhood, and then all of a sudden you see these big brand new homes where you could easily throw in an ED unit in the back, or add an extra, like, small little studio on the side of the house with, just by making some changes to the layout of that particular home. Is that something that could be done where we're incentivizing or pushing for this ADU type density bonus program?
As mentioned in the strategies, there are 2 ADU components to this: to build out the existing program, to provide more incentives, to look at ways in which we can convert ADU plot splits in order to allow for ownership opportunities as opposed to existing rental opportunities. So that is part of the existing strategies.
Okay. But is that something that other cities are doing that have successfully helped increase the number of EDUs?
Yes, so that's what San Diego does now, and that through the report, you would see we reference that program that San Diego runs, and look to see if we can modify that to meet the needs of San Jose.
Okay. And do you see a big difference with what San Diego has done, and it could be feasible here in San Jose? And what what number of new ADU numbers would you see an increase?
It is feasible to support a San Diego project here in San Jose. We do not have any projections on numbers. That is difficult to do based on existing data sets for ADUs, which are not well captured. And like any of these strategies, no one of these strategies changes the landscape. It's pushing on as many multiple levers as we can to try to get to a global catalytic change in our overall production of housing.
And have you, I know I've seen huge pushbacks on when certain neighborhoods against EDUs. Have you been tracking any of that kind of data where you're hearing negative things about EDU?
I have not received, the department doesn't track that. PBCE may be tracking that, but the housing department doesn't receive that type of data.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
That was gonna be actually my question, but I think I'm listening that or hearing that we don't track any kind of ADU, like how many people in San Jose have an ADU?
PBCE has some preliminary data on that because of the streamlining, the pre-approved prototypes that they have. That's not to say that are there folks building ADUs in their backyards that are unpermitted? Absolutely. So they have some data, but it does not represent the full comprehensive number of ADUs that are out in the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think if you know, like if you could get a little bit more data about if those people are actually renting, I think that would be helpful to see if like any of these proposed actions might actually work. Because we did have a conversation about this a while back, and a lot of the commissioners were not too keen on the idea for various reasons about renting and whatever. So yeah, I think just like finding out if they would actually rent the ADU would.
So the only permissible under ordinance that ADUs can do is rent. That's why part of the strategy here is how do we move from rental also into home ownership opportunities? So that is existing today. We know the ADUs that are known within the city that are permitted, have been developed, and how many of them have existing occupancy we do not track. We don't have a means of tracking occupancy, but we do know they're built to rent.
Okay. And then my other, I don't know, it's a question, I don't think it's more of a thought, but when you're looking at my community, it's single family homes. There's no space where you would be able to build any of these wonderful duplexes or whatever. And you don't have to answer now, but are you thinking about those neighborhoods and just thinking about how you can invest or how can those neighborhoods look like in the future?
Well, I think the general plan, which is now going to go through its 4-year update in the next coming year, presents an opportunity to receive that community input on what future density within the city could look like.
Commissioner Moore.
Thank you. So I was on the general plan task force and I watched regulations dry up development. And if you've ever taken a basic economics class, supply and a demand affect pricing. And when you I'm so grateful that you're starting to look at that instead of the ideology of whatever they looked at before. So I think this is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Is that it? Commissioner Breeder?
Yes. On page 4 of your document, you have a typo. The second page, it says need support since only. There should be a space between those two words. Overall, I thought that this was really great. I love the creative ideas that you guys had as far as like, for instance, talking about the it came down 30 years ago that they should have multiple egresses out of these apartments, and it's, eating up space, that we need people to live in. To address the ADU situation, just because case I don't say it maybe enough, but I am a realtor, so I do understand housing sometimes. For the ADU situation, the reason why it's so great is because we're essentially taking our ability that, or our lack of ability, we have no money to build things, but we can give the power back to the people that own homes and let them build. Now, previously, the state law is that if you have a 5,000 square foot lot, you can build an ADU and no local municipality can stop you from doing that. I think that what we're looking at through this, through the housing department is looking through other areas, maybe if you had one ADU and you had space for a second ADU, that maybe they would let you build that second one, even if it didn't meet all of the criteria. But you would make sure that for 3 years it was for middle income. Is that correct? That would be the performance of that.
That would be a way to approach it, yes.
And so what's great about that is that we're putting the power back to the people and letting them use the resources that they have and also allowing it to be something that they can make money from. The problem with ADUs, and I know that Eric's brought this up before, people build them and then their families live in them. So technically, people are using them and they need them, but they're not being used in the way that we need them to be used. And so if we can open up the space to do more opportunities for people to do their own development, that takes some of the burden off the city. And it also allows people to develop their land. It gives them more ownership of what they have. Hopefully creates more wealth for them if possible, but regardless, it gives housing that we are not paying for. So I liked a lot of those creative ideas that you guys had because I think it's going to take a lot of very creative ideas to address these issues. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Trent?
Yes, thank you. I have greatly enjoyed the graphic. I think it's always a great way to visualize and understand what we're talking about when we're trying to get into the constructions of middle income housing, right? I mean, and my first thought as I saw the graphic is that the biggest opportunity we have to actually make a big dent in here is all the urban villages. So I'm actually kind of curious here because I know we've got like 8 target urban villages. But I just keep hearing about delays in terms of getting those moved along. Do you have any good news about our urban villages?
So a lot of our affordable restricted units are coming out of urban villages. So there is progress in those urban villages. And I predict probably we'll see a lot more coming as we create, as an example, our moderate income housing incentive program, which was designed in December and approved by council in late December, is now oversubscribed. And a lot of that is coming through some of our urban village designations. So we're seeing some growth there. But we need to, as a city and in this current economic environment, look for ways to better incentivize and move a variety of mixed income projects forward. And that includes the city aligning our resources with the county, with the housing authority, get to more affordable production at lower AMI scales. And how do we, across the departments, streamline a lot of our reviews, because time is literally money for a lot of these projects, and where we can compress those times of reviews to move those projects forward, where do we continue to make that work happen?
Okay. I mean, that's always good to hear that we can make that progress. I mean, I'm looking at just the Berryessa location myself, and I know that I wonder if you have an update there, because I believe there was a moment when the housing element had not yet been approved, and there was a developer focused on who had originally proposed much higher density projects, but then immediately shot him down or reduced those projections to focus on, I guess, more townhouses. I'm actually trying to get caught up on that, right? Like, where do we stand on the Berryessa project? Are we still on track to meet the original projections that were under the housing element there?
I believe you're referring to a builder's remedy project, and I can't comment on that at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Understood though, it usually means litigation, right?
Yeah.
That's the lawyer side of me. Okay. And it's good to also capture the data though, to see that at least to a certain degree, we're catching up on the affordable side. Now, I recognize it's not the best way for the affordable production to catch up. It just means that market rate production is down. But what's interesting is that when we tend to spend a little time looking at just past the cursory economics arguments of it, and actually analyze that the need for mixed income housing development, it's because one thing we have to acknowledge here is that for us to 100% solve the housing crisis, we have to build a heck of a lot more housing than is just actually possible at the moment. So if our approach is only market rate, so that we can hope at some point that the benefits of that will trickle down to the people who can't afford housing, we go back to the same problem we had originally. We're building people housing for people who can afford it and not necessarily for those who actually need it. Thank you.
Commissioner Dawson.
Uh, I'm really excited to see this come forward. It's intriguing, and I realize this is just a first look, so I'm not going to ask some of the detailed questions. I've spent some time getting up to speed in San Diego, and I think there was a second memo issued, and I haven't had a chance to compare the pages. Is the second memo that was sent out the same as the first? I only got about halfway through comparing. In the first memo that was in the packet, you get to what to me is the perplexing question. And in fact, San Diego is still grappling with this question. And that is the 92-93% of R1 zoning we have in this city. And boy, there is no tougher conversation out in the community than talking about SB 9. I loved SB 9, just on the record. I thought it was great legislation. And I made a note from the Housing Catalyst report to find out what happened about those 3 developments that were mentioned there. And I just want to ask one quick question. I know we can't do a cookie cutter, but there's some great things in San Diego. Are we looking at some of like what they do in what's called a sustainable development area? I mean, are we going to hear more about this? And is this going to wind up being in Planning Commission, or are we going to hear periodic updates? Or I really want to see you push this forward, because there is a need and it's not going to get met any other way.
Okay. Yeah, sustainable developments are more in the lane of planning, building, and code enforcement than in the housing department. You know, the planning department sort of sets forth sort of the foundation of the plan of all that is, you know, possible within our housing typology and development in the city. The housing department has a different charge. Our charge is, so what's financeable and what can we get out of the ground and how much of that can produce and how quickly can we produce it? So we take that foundation laid forth by Planning Commission, things like sustainable development comes a part of it. It's included in our affordable housing development. It's included in our market rate incentives. So we're able to execute on some of that. But the more global sort of general plan amendments around sustainable development, that's more in PBCE's lane than in the housing department's lane.
Well, anyway, thank you for
Yeah.
starting us to think about this. And I'm pleased that it's moved to some action from beyond what was in the housing element. So thank you very much for that. And it's going to be fun to watch what San Diego does the next few months with their exemptions in certain R1 districts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zipperman.
It's really exciting to see this program come through. I know a lot of other cities right now are working on their missing middle programs. I want to both second and kind of comment on Commissioner Tran's comments about building in urban villages. It's obviously really important that we're building missing middle housing in high resource areas. But I also want to make sure that we are looking at these typologies in all single family neighborhoods, because they certainly don't degrade the neighborhood to have these different types. And then in terms of ADUs, it's been a big question in the state how much ADUs are contributing to lower income housing. And so as we do expand, and I think it's really important that we do, because it's just another housing type that we have in our tool belt, that we monitor how much is actually going to be used for lower income, and that it's in fact used for lower income and not for the families that are living in the house, which is also good, but we need it counting correctly for RHNA purposes.
Commissioner Finn.
There was a recommendation to allow ADUs to be sold separately from the main property. How would that work? Would that just be the unit, or would the actual land underneath it also be sold?
That is to be decided, as we'll have to, if council and mayor adopt this strategy, we'll have to figure out what that looks like and how that could be executed. I don't have a comment today because we're not quite sure what that looks like. There's a number of different options, condoing out, plotting out, quick claim division outs. There's a lot of different ways you can kind of do it. And I don't have a clear determination as to how we're going to do that right now.
Because I can see if they just sold the unit and not the land underneath it, that could present a problem down the road for the people that bought that unit. So I would think if you wanted to do that, it would have to be a real estate, not just the unit.
Yeah.
So, anyway, yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Gabriel?
I actually encourage and have talked about this in the past, how to incentivize this type of building. It really doesn't matter if the family keeps it to their relatives for their children or whatever, mother or sister, or if they are provided to a renter or a homeowner. It's creating more housing. Also, it would allow people to be creative with their investments. I'm thinking of the really big homes and big yards. Who would want to give up all that privacy? After all, we don't really spend that much time in the backyard. So I prefer this innovative type of thinking and feel that it's a great solution to keeping our residents in the city.
Commissioner Moad?
Well, thank you. I don't have much to add. Everyone, that's the benefit of being last. Everyone said pretty much what I was thinking. Just one point I wanted to raise that wasn't, well, kind of brought up. Is one of the ongoing impediments to building here in San Jose, and it's true in other parts like San Francisco, is the permitting process, complicated and expensive, and the regulations. And I know the city's doing a lot of work to streamline that. So I think that's something that should be top of mind in terms of continuing to streamline it to a point where builders aren't running into roadblocks for building. That is just going to, create a better environment when it comes to building housing here.
Okay, and we'll go one more round. Commissioner Navarro, do you have anything to add? Okay. I do have something to add regarding the families. I think this is one of the conversations where we lasted about an hour, but I think just being very culturally competent in many cultures, having your family members live with you is very normal. In my community, there's 10 people in a household because they have not only, the child, but they also have their parents living with them, and they might have their brother. So I think when we're talking about family renting that ADU, at least in Latino families, that's already very normal. My neighbor's Vietnamese, so it's also very normal from what I've seen. So I think as we're thinking about, who we're renting it out to, just keeping in mind and being culturally competent that this already happens in many cultures. Commissioner Moore?
To add on to what you're saying, I agree. To block it because it's not low-income housing is what they did in the past. And that's what's created the supply problem. We need supply.
Commissioner Baylor? Anything to add? Commissioner Trapp? Commissioner Paulson? No? Ben? Gabriel?
Additionally, I feel like a lot of young men and women cannot afford the rent and they live with their parents as adults. This would solve that problem and not much on their parents anymore and pay their own bills. Thank you.
And Commissioner Mo, okay. And that's it, right? We don't have to take it. Okay. We are moving on to item D, commission nominations for officers. And the action is to make nominations for positions of chair and vice chair of the commission to serve in the fiscal year 2025-2026, commencing with the first commission meeting after the June 25 regular meeting. Do we have any nominations?
I'm sorry.
Do we have any nominations for chair?
I would
And,
like to nominate,
I saw Commissioner Finn and then Commissioner Dawson.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Partida, excuse me, to the office of chair.
Commissioner Dawson?
Well, he stole my thunder, but I would like to say on behalf of Chair Jazinski, because I did speak with Chair Jazinski today. First of all, to apologize because I thought my behavior was a little unprofessional at the last meeting, and to let Chair Jazinski know that he was a rock star chair. Mic drop. I mean, seriously, a very fair, even-minded chair. And asked if he was interested in chair or vice chair, and he said, absolutely not. And he said, but he asked me to do this for him. He said, if I was there, I would nominate Vice Chair Partida as chair of next year's commission. And I believe his exact words were, she has put her heart and soul into this work, and she deserves to be chair next year. So I don't know if you need a second to a nomination, but anyway, ditto to Commissioner Finn. And anyway, I fulfill my commitment to Chair Jazinski, and you all know how he feels about his vice chair for this year. So, and many thanks to both of them, by the way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Moad. I think he would be steadfast and consistent and provide really good balance for our commission. Did I say it right?
Yep.
Thanks.
So for chair,
What?
for chair or
For chair.
okay. Any other nominations?
No new one, but just to comment that even in absentia, Chair Jazinski really showed his strength of character. I just also would like to express my support for Vice Chair Partida to serve as chair.
Thank you. Any other oh,
I'd like to
Commissioner.
nominate Commissioner Tran for vice chair.
For vice chair? Vice chair.
We're not there yet, but also I'll preempt all of that by saying I'm going to decline. I have enough responsibilities, but thank you.
Any other nominations?
Okay, so I think,
Well, I think we need a vice, so
Yeah.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Navarro for the vice chair.
I respectfully decline. I'm super busy as well with tasks. But would love to nominate Commissioner Dawson as vice chair.
Well, I am retired. Yeah, thank you.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay.
I second.
okay, I think as for nominations, we will just announce it, and then next month is when we actually do the vote to confirm. So at this point, you can either accept the nomination or not, but we'll vote for the position in June.
Yes, that's a correct. Just everyone who's been nominated would have to clearly accept. And I would just note that at the next meeting is we have the next round of just the cycle of additional participants being added to the committee, just to consider that on their advisement, as well as I think it's up to 3 nominations or 4 nominations are up. So that's going to be added to the next round as well. So this today is just for nominations and no voting.
Vice Chair Partida, you're accepting? And Commissioner Moad, you're also accepting? Okay. just want to confirm that. And Commissioner Dawson, you're accepting for vice chair? Okay, for the nomination. Thank you.
Okay, and can we still nominate next month? Or is this it?
Yeah, you can.
Okay,
I'm not so sure about that. Let me check on that. But
okay,
So, okay.
okay.
Sorry, point of order. Are there other nominations or just those two? You mentioned there were others.
Yeah, we have
Great.
three. We have Vice Chair Partita per chair, you chair, Commissioner Mawad as other chair, and then Commissioner Dawson for vice chair.
No, I'm sorry. I meant
You mean positions?
Positions, yeah. It's
Those are
just
the only two.
There's only two positions.
Okay. So we are moving on to the last public open forum of the night. There's nobody here, but I do want to open it up for commissioners if you have anything that you want to comment on. I saw it. Commissioner Dawson.
I just want to say that I had the privilege of touring Blossom Valley Senior Apartments run by Charities Housing. It was a controversial project with the neighbors because it is set aside for chronically homeless, and that upset the community. But to see the project in the ground, see what's there for support services, it was just wonderful. And I hope if other folks get a chance to tour these projects, I highly recommend Quetzal Gardens, catacornered from Mexican Heritage Plaza. And I don't know if it's possible, Director Sullivan and staff, to arrange some of these tours for us, or just make sure we know when tours become available. I think it's important we see these things in person and see the residents. And I couldn't believe the one room that had a dishwasher in a single room. It was, frankly, it was just amazing. Thank you.
I saw Commissioner Finn and I'll come back.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the organization I work for, the Housing Action Coalition, conducts a lot of these tours, and I'm happy to share that out to the commission as they become available. And I also went on the tour, and it was sponsored. And it was great.
Commissioner Finn?
Yes, I would like to ask Eric how he's going to let us know whether or not we can nominate again next month.
I'll have Mindy send out a note just to make sure. I don't know what the past practice has been, and I'll just have to check on just a and then I'll
Okay.
have Mindy send out a note to the commissioners.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then I would also like to say that it's been a pleasure to work with the vice chair. I think that she has kept a very calm and reasonable meetings here, along with Chair Jazinski. I think that she's upheld her position very well. She's always willing to listen to both sides of every issue and take everybody's opinions into her heart and really look them over before making any decisions. So I just want to thank her for the work she's done with us. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Hey, well,
Commissioner Navarro?
so, I got a email from, I think we all received an email from one of our former commissioners, one of my favorite commissioners, even though I disagree with her 97% of the time. I loved her. But she sent an email about her strongly urging reappointment of Commissioner Partita. I want to say that from the bottom of my heart, you've been wonderful to work with. I think everybody here in this room could agree. And if I know that it would be great if the housing staff could forward that message and sentiment from everybody here to the current council member, and if you could, we could send that message. What a great asset! Yeah, what a great asset Commissioner Partita has been. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and I hope we both get reappointed again.
And just want to thank everybody for the kind words. And we'll see how everything moves forward. Thank you, everybody. It was really kind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.